Hello and welcome to Byju's Exam Prep IAS. Very warm good evening to everyone. I hope all of you are doing absolutely fine. I welcome you on today's class of governance. This is class number 5. We'll wait for a couple of minutes. Let everyone join in and then we will begin. Thank you so much. Good evening everyone. Hello Vechri, good evening Taran. Hello Simran, Sulakshna, Chituri, good evening. Good Sulakshna, good day then. Hi Aniket, hi Akshada, good evening Vaishna, good evening, good evening. Good evening, Devi. Good evening, Arnab. Hello, Mohan. Good evening. Good evening, Mustafa. Good evening, Akhil. Hi, Abhijit. Good evening. Good evening. Hello, Simran. Good evening. Good evening, Veera. Veshi saying, I'm not able to fill the form. Has anyone filled it here? First attempt a bit tense. Anyone has filled it? So Lakshna has said she has filled it. I'm not sure how to connect Veshi with Sulakshna, but tell me what issues are you facing? I told you yesterday as well, and I'll tell this once again. The issues that you're facing in filling up the UPSC form, you can mail them to me, and I will try and see how they can be resolved. So again, I gave you the email ID yesterday. So what you can do? Basically, you can talk to Suraksha, but I don't know how will you communicate with her. So it's okay, you can talk to her, but I don't know if she's okay or not. I don't know. Anyways, I gave the mail ID to you. I'll give you once again. The issues that you're facing in filling up the UPSC form, you can try and mail specific issues here, and I'll try and resolve those. Again, please don't just write, I am not able to fill the form. Tell me what specific issue are you facing? Where exactly is it stuck? Okay. So Lakshna is saying, please tell the fellow aspirants they should take care of instructions and pixels while uploading the photo and signature, if that's the issue that you're facing. Vaishri, I'm giving you my email ID. I think that would be good enough for you. You can mail this to me, whatever issue that you're facing, rather than taking email ID of Lakshna. You can take my email ID and then you can mail whatever issue that you have. Okay. Okay, so a lot of people are facing issues with, I think, image and signature not being uploaded. So, see, image and signature, it's not that difficult. Usually, it's a matter of size. You have to see how many pixels is it allowed. You can resize your picture using Microsoft Paint. So, you have that in your laptop or your computer, you have Microsoft Paint, MS Paint. You can resize that there, it won't be much of an issue. So, you can try and see that because this is usually where most of the issues are. Vetri, as I said, uh, okay. As I said, guys, let's keep all these doubts that you have in the email. Try and write in the email whatever doubt that you have, one line, two line, whatever doubt that you have, right here, and don't worry, we'll help you out. Okay. Vivek, email ID is not clear. I don't know how clearer I can write. This is as clear as I can write. I don't have a better handwriting than this, Vivek. I'm not sure why can you not read this. Okay. Should we go ahead then? Should we go ahead then? Siva Krishna, you don't have to use the online resizer. You can just use MS Paint in your laptop or your computer. That would be good enough. That would not really be an issue. Okay. Okay. Got it. Vivek, Singh. Okay. This is the name. Anyways, let's go ahead then. So today is class number 5 of governance. Today will also be the beginning of module number 5 of governance. In this module today, we will be discussing basics of governance. And when I say governance, that I don't mean to say the subject governance. When I say governance, I mean to say how usually the governments work in India, what are the values, what are the qualities that a good government must have, and we'll also be discussing the topic of e-governance, how e-governance works, how is the government now trying to go ahead in the area of e-governance, what are the new reforms that are coming up. All these things will be discussed. Now, let's start with the basic idea of governance. In simple terms, you can define governance as the decision making of the elected government, the government that is in power, the way that they take the decisions, the way that they allocate resources amongst the community, the way that they decide which law to pass, which law not to pass, all that combined comes in the category of governance. So, governance is nothing but the decision making process for the government that is in power. Usually, there are certain qualities that you look for in a good government. A good government, if you want to define it, would have certain qualities, and we'll discuss that as well. For example, good governance would keep the interests of the citizens at their heart. Any good government, or any government, for example, that has been taking decisions keeping in mind the interest of the common public, keeping in mind what is good for the public, that is what good governance is all about. Now, good governance, as I said, is mostly the decision making process, not for a specific individual but for the entire society at large. In India, recently, a few years back, the government has even started to observe something called the Good Governance Day. Now, what exactly is Good Governance Day? How has the government of India been started it? The government of India started this a few years back. Good Governance Day is celebrated on the 25th of December. That is the birthday of Atal Bihari Vajpayee, former Prime Minister, former Bharat Ratna as well. The good governance as a topic as such has been spoken about by the government time and time again. Right now, there are multiple rankings across the world and within India also. Niti Aayog, for example, also publishes multiple rankings, ranking different states on how good they are governed, what are the issues, are there some values that we can learn from different states. Now, from examination point of view, what do we have to study here? From examination point of view, there are certain things that can be asked. For example, you can be asked about certain values that every government must follow, or what are the indications that the government is doing a good job. You can also be asked in the examination about the reforms in governance. For example, in today's class, we will be discussing some of the reforms that have been introduced in governance. Also, there are a lot of frequent questions now asked on the topic of e-governance. E-governance has come up as one of those topics which continuously appear in the UPSC examination now. E-governance is nothing but the use of technology by the government to reach out to more and more people. We'll be discussing that also, as in what exactly is e-governance. Now, let's start with a very basic definition and try and understand, when we say that a particular government is good, what are the values that a good government would have. Now, it is important for all of you to understand each and every one of these words so that you can actually quote and write examples. A good government usually has these things: participatory, consensus oriented, accountable, transparent, rule of law, equitable, inclusive, effective, efficient, and responsive. Let's try and understand this one by one. Let's start the first one: participatory. Participatory, in simple terms, would mean the government should ensure more and more participation of the people. In what activities? For example, voting percentage, how many people are coming out to vote, is the government encouraging people to come out to vote or not, are there people who are not able to come out and vote, are there people who are not able to register themselves to vote, etc. So that is voting percentage. Second, you can also see let's say the government of India asks for certain feedback from the people. Are the people interested in giving feedback on it? Let me give you an example. Many of the people would not know this, but when the government wants to pass an important law, what they do is, before passing it in the parliament, The government first asks for the feedback of the people. So common people can actually write feedback on the draft of the law and send it to the government. It is a very common exercise. The government either publishes the draft bill on the PIB, or the government publishes the draft of the bill on the MyGov app where you can go and check out, and you can give suggestions to the government whether or not you like it, some other ideas that you have. I'm not saying is it 100% true that the government will accept your suggestions or feedback, but at least there is an option that government is open to dialogue with the people. I'll give you an example. When the Nirbhaya case happened in Delhi, at that point of time, the law in India was that if you are not 18 years of age, if you are even one day younger than 18 years, even if you are one day below that age, the maximum punishment that you would get for any crime would only be 3 years. So in Nirbhaya case, while other people who were adults were sentenced to death, one of the persons who was convicted in the case was a few days below 18 years and he was only given a 3 year sentence and then he was let go of. There was a huge uproar in the country, there was a big movement. Many people demanded that the law should be changed and we should allow harder or a much more serious punishment for juveniles as well, below 18 years as well, if they commit a heinous crime. The government made a committee called Justice Verma Committee. There was a committee formed by the government back then called the Justice Verma Committee. This committee was asked that you can go ahead and you can give feedback to the government about what changes to make in the juvenile law. Now, when this committee was functioning, they had specifically given multiple advertisements in the newspapers. They gave an email ID to the people and they asked the people, what are your suggestions? Write to us. They asked the people, what are your suggestions? Do you think that a law should be in a certain way or not? Write back to us and we will make those changes. But the irony was that while there were lakhs of people on the street protesting against the government, very few people actually knew that you can even write a feedback and the committee will look into it. So the government tries to be participative, meaning that the government tries to take input from the people as well. That is an example of a good government. How many of you here have ever used the MyGov app? Let me ask this question. How many of you have ever used this app or have even seen the app, let alone using it? Have you even seen the app? Some have used it. Some have used it. Okay. Most have not. Okay. Some people have used it, some people have, okay, perfect, perfect, some people have visited it also. So if you so if you have not seen the app, my suggestion would be go ahead, just download the app, MyGov. It's an interesting app. It's a way for the government to communicate with the public. So there are a lot of quiz competitions where you can take part. There are blogs that you can write. On the same app, you can even give feedback to the government on different laws, etc., that the government is trying to pass. Again, there's no guarantee that the government will listen to it or your feedback will be accepted, but at least there is a way for you to participate. So a good government, number one, has to be participative, has to be participatory, has to open up this boundary and allow the people, the common people, to communicate with the government going forward. Second, it has to be consensus oriented. Now, what do you mean by this? Let's look at the present scenario. In the present scenario, the ruling party, that is the BJP, is in a comfortable majority in the Lok Sabha, meaning that they can pass any bill in the Lok Sabha without the support of anyone else. And they do that quite often. You would have seen news stories in the past few years that many bills are not even discussed these days. Many bills are not even given to the committees. The government just introduces the bill. Within a few minutes, the voting takes place, it is passed, and it becomes a law. Now, while there is nothing illegal in that, the entire point is the government, at the end of the day, is in the majority in Lok Sabha. And if they are in the majority, they can pass the bill. There's no stopping them. So no one is saying it is illegal. But is it the right way to govern? Is it the best way to govern? Not really. See, the idea of consensus oriented is, even if you are in the majority, you should at least make an attempt to listen to the other side as well. Why? The simple idea is you never know from where a good idea can come. If you are, if any one of you has studied political science, or if you have political science as your optional subject, you might have heard of a name called J.S. Mill. Or in ethics also, you might have heard of this name, J.S. Mill. Have you heard of him? J.S. Mill, John Stuart Mill. Some of you might have heard his name in pol science. If not, no issues. Okay, so the reason why I'm telling you about J.S. Mill or the name, the reason is that he spoke a lot about the freedom that has to be given in the society. So he basically gave a thought. His idea was, how do you identify whether a society has developed or not? How you identify whether a society is a good place for people to live or not? He said that in a developed society, in a civilized society, if 99.99% people have one opinion and only 0.01% people have the other opinion, even then, this 0.01 percentage of people have the right to be heard. Even if you're in the minority, even if you are all alone and everyone else has a different opinion, even then, the person who is all alone, who is in the minority, has a right to be heard. Again, not saying that what he's saying has to be accepted, but at least a right, he has a right to be heard. The idea is, you never know from where you can get a great idea. There is no rule that says only majority will have good ideas. Maybe who is someone who is not in the majority might also have good ideas. So a government ideally should be consensus oriented, not saying that they should always try and build consensus, because that is not possible. For building a consensus, even the opposition has to support the government, so you can't just blame the government for everything. But the government should at least try, they should at least take the first step, try and see if they are able to build a consensus. If they are not able to build a consensus, then use their majority. At the end of the day, they can do whatever they want with the help of the majority. But the first step should not be that now I'll use my majority no matter what. No. The first step should always be that it should try and build some consensus. Third, the government has to be accountable. We have discussed a lot about accountability. We have discussed the idea of CAG, how the CAG's office is extremely important, how the government has to be accountable for its actions. Let me give you a simple example. When the first wave of COVID ended, before the second wave began, health minister made a statement in an interview where he said the COVID is over, we are out of COVID, no issues now. And after that claim, thousands of people died in the second wave. The simple idea is the government has to accept it, that yes, whatever we said was wrong, we were mistaken, something like this we have never seen earlier, but we will try and do better. But the problem is, around the world, you will never see any government coming out and apologizing for its own weakness or for its wrong decisions. Because apologizing for wrong decisions is seen as a weakness. It's seen as a government that is not able to rule. So the problem is, despite all the wrong decisions that the governments would have taken, and I'm talking about all the governments. See, since our independence till today, every government says the same thing. We will remove poverty, we will work for welfare of farmers, we will try and improve India's economy. But even after all those years, if we still have poverty, even after all those years, if we still have large scale unemployment, that means some government in the middle was not doing their job properly, right? It's not possible that every single government was doing their job properly and still we are in this scenario. But you have never seen any government or any government representative apologizing, saying that sorry, our target was much higher, we were not able to achieve it. You will never see that happening. So the governments usually are not held accountable. In India, the only way you hold the government accountable is once in 5 years. Once the 5 year period is over, they again come to you asking for votes. That is the only way that you can actually make the government accountable. But there is no other way in which it can happen. The government should be transparent. We have discussed about RTI in detail. The government should be open to sharing information. The government should be open to telling people how is it run. If the government, for example, is in losses, they should tell that. I'll give you a real example. You all know about the 1991 LPG reforms, right? You all have heard about the 1991 LPG reforms. Now, what you might not have known was what was happening before 1991. From 1989 to 91, what exactly was happening? So, understand this, from 1989 itself, the situation of Indian economy was extremely critical. It did not happen overnight in 1991 that all our foreign exchange got used up and we did not have it. It was a very gradual decline. So governments saw it. It's not that the government did not know it. Now, at that point of time, multiple governments tried multiple things. One very interesting thing that happened at that point of time was before PV Narasimha Rao. So PV Narasimha Rao was the prime minister when the LPG reforms were carried out. Before PV Narasimha Rao, we had Chandrasekhar as the prime minister. When Chandrasekhar was the prime minister, he got to know that the situation of our economy is so bad. Our foreign exchange reserves are almost zero. We have to do something about it. So the Chandrasekhar government, what they did was they sold India's gold. So India's gold reserves that were with the RBI, tons and tons of India's gold reserves were sold. Usually what happens is when a government wants to sell gold, let's say you sell gold to a foreign bank. Usually this is how the gold is sold. So usually, let's say you sell gold to a Swiss bank or some other bank. Usually the banks say, okay, we are buying your gold, but don't deliver it to us. We trust you. You keep the gold in India only. Don't worry, we'll give you money whenever we need. Gold is more of a guarantee. Whenever we need it, we'll take it, but you don't have to deliver gold right now. That's what usually happens. That when a government wants to sell gold, the government doesn't have to deliver it. There's a paperwork that's signed, everything is done. Gold is more of a guarantee. If the bank really wants, they can take it up. But India's situation was so bad at that point of time that no one trusted that India actually will be able to repay the money. So when Indian government decided to sell gold to Japan and to Switzerland, the banks asked for delivery of gold. They said, no, gold has to be delivered, only then you will get the money. So what happened was there were these huge boxes filled up with gold at the airport, loaded up on the airplane. Now the interesting part is government never told this to anyone because the government knew if they give this information out in the public, if news media comes to know about it, everyone will then blame the government. Everyone will say, oh, the government has been selling India's gold. Because see, in India, in our mentality, selling of gold is absolutely the last thing. Do this experiment at your home. Go to your mom and tell her, Mom, I think we should sell some gold. And look at her reaction. You will get to know what I'm talking about. Selling of gold in Indian household is considered absolutely the last thing when you are in crisis and there is no other option. Only then you go out and sell gold. Otherwise, it's just not an option that is considered in Indian household usually. So imagine if government would have told people that we are selling gold, what would be the situation? But the government's misfortune was at the airport at that time there were some journalists just flying their own privately, and those journalists saw the gold being loaded, big boxes of gold written RBI all over it being loaded in the planes, and that's how the story broke. So the story broke out next day in the media. Everyone got to know, oh, what's happening. The government is selling gold, and that led to further instability. This was an example of government not being transparent. When we say government should be transparent, that means government should tell the public what is the current situation, what are we actually going through, and trust the public to be mature enough to support the government. If you don't trust the public to be mature enough to trust the government, then it's a problem. But you have to trust the public that they will be able to understand. Then the government has to be responsive. Responsive means try and take the people's feedback and then act accordingly. For example, again, I'll give you an example from Paul Science. So usually there is a concept called system theory. You don't have to remember it, but just for your understanding sake, there is a concept called systems theory in which a government is defined like this. This is the government, these are the inputs, this is the output, and then this is the feedback. So basically, the idea is you give input to the government. What is input? Input are the demands that you make to the government. Inputs are demands, suggestions that you give to the government. Based on that, the government gives you output. Output is what? Output is laws that the government makes, policies that the government makes. Based on the laws and policies, if you like it or you don't like it, you give feedback to the government. You give feedback to the government, and then the government will then change accordingly. That is how a usual government works. Simple way to define a government is this: the government takes inputs. Based on the inputs, they give you the output. You like it, you don't like it. Depending on that, you give a feedback to the government. Now, ideally, ideally, a government must listen to this feedback. A government that listens to this feedback is called responsive. A government that listens to the feedback is called responsive. A government that does not listen to the feedback will be considered as dictatorial. A dictatorial or authoritarian government is the one that does not listen to the feedback. But when a government has to be responsive, means they have to listen to the feedback and then change accordingly. So a government ideally has to be responsive. Now there are multiple examples that I can give you. You might like it or you might not like it. You might say it's a negative example, but take the example of the farm bills. The farm laws that the government of India introduced, three of them. This led to this large scale farmer protest. The government eventually withdrew these laws. Now that's an example of government being responsive. Whether right or wrong, whether government should have done this, should not have done this, that's a separate debate altogether. But it's an example of the government being responsive. Take a opposite example, the Lokpal bill. We had discussed about the Lokpal earlier. The Lokpal was a result of this huge agitation led by Anna Hazare and others. That is again an example of the government being responsive to the demands being made by the people. Then the government has to be effective and efficient. What do you mean by this? Mahatma Gandhi very famously gave the theory of trusteeship. Have you heard of it? Gandhi's theory of trusteeship. Anyone who has not heard of it? Anyone who does not know what this is? Or everyone knows? Okay. Let me remind you quickly. Let me remind you, even if you know this. So, Gandhi's theory of trusteeship is simple. Like, he said that people who are running the government are not the owners of the government. So, if you are in power, if you are the prime minister, the president, minister, whatever, you are not the owner of the government. You are not the owner of the power. You are just a trustee. Trustee means a temporary head of an organization who has to pass it on to someone else after some years. That's what a trustee is. If you're a trustee of an organization, means you don't own the organization. You are the head of the organization. You will look into its operations. You will make sure that you are keeping its welfare at the center, but you will have to pass it on later on. That is called the concept of trusteeship. Now, as per Mahatma Gandhi, The people running the government must realize this. And thus, while they are working, they have to be effective and efficient. I'll give you an example. See, like right now, members of parliament decide their own salary. Minister's salary also is decided by the parliament only. So tomorrow, let's assume tomorrow, if the government introduces a bill which says that from now onwards, every member of parliament will get 1 crore rupees per month as a salary. There is nothing in the parliament that is illegal about it. Sorry, there's nothing in the constitution rather that's illegal about it. The constitution does not put any limit on how much salary an MP can take. Let's assume they decide that an MP will now take 1 crore rupees of salary per month. It is legal, but is it efficient? No, it's not efficient use of money, because the government could have used this money somewhere else as well. So just because the government has the option of spending a lot more doesn't mean that they should spend that much money. Because at the end of the day, the government has to understand they don't own this. They are not the owners of this money. They are not the owners of the government. They are not the owners of the country. They are just the trustee. They are there for a specific limited time period to take care of stuff, and then they'll have to pass it on. So a government ideally has to be effective and efficient. Then the government has to be equitable and inclusive. The idea is, while participatory, or while the government is actually being open to all the people, they should show it in terms of participation. Let me do this. Let's do this as an experiment. Don't Google. Okay, don't Google this. Tell me, without Googling, the names of women ministers in India apart from Smriti Irani and Nirmala Sitharaman. Right now, can you tell me name of women ministers apart from Nirmala Sitharaman and Smriti Irani? Let's see how many of you remember. And again, don't Google. Taran, Mamta Banerjee is not a union minister. Mamta Banerjee is a chief minister. Guys, I am asking about specific central government ministers. So Mamta Banerjee is not, Draupadi Murmu is the president, Mahua Mohita is not a minister, Sushma Swaraj is no more. So I am not sure what examples are you giving me. Think about it. How many of you can remember some names? And again, don't Google, it will ruin the fun of it. Namrata, are you sure Prahlad Singh Patel is a woman? Okay. So again, this is just to show. See, I am not saying that there are other women ministers, there are not other women ministers, but the fact is you're having an extremely hard time remembering, right? Extremely hard time remembering. Okay. Let me ask you one more question on top of it. Let's leave the women part aside. Let me ask you one more question. Can you remember the name of any minister who is physically disabled but is a minister? Anyone? Name of a minister who is made a minister but is physically disabled. What do you think? Divyangjan, as you call them. Can you name any? No, you would not be able to name any, right? And this is not your fault. This is not your fault. This is the government's fault that they are not inclusive enough. That is the idea. This is the government's fault that they are not inclusive enough, that they are not actually able to include and make the government more diverse as compared to what it used to be. Let's assume that the population of Divyangjan or physically disabled is lower, but at least the population of women is close to 50%. At least the women, not including women in your cabinet, there should not be any excuse for that. But we have a situation like that. So an ideal government has to be more inclusive and has to be more equitable. Last but not the least, a good government should follow the rule of law. Now, this is extremely important. Rule of law. Now, around the entire society, there is a big debate about the rule of law thing. I'll give you a few examples so that you can actually try and connect to what I'm telling you. A few years back, there was a case in Hyderabad. There was a young lady doctor. She apparently was going on her two-wheeler. her two-wheeler punctured. She was apparently kidnapped by a few people. She was raped and then she was burnt, killed and then burnt. So her dead body was found. And the result was there was a lot of anger amongst the people, lot of pressure on the police. The police arrested all the people. And then what happened was that within a few days, the police killed all of them. The police said that we took them to the site where the incident took place. We wanted to investigate them. Police said that they started to run away, so we had to shoot them. Most of the people were very happy. They applauded the police. Everyone said, "Great job, great job, great job." Great. Now let's take an example of some other place. Another similar example took place, or in case of, let's say, Vikas Dubey. So Vikas Dubey, this gangster from UP, he had killed a lot of police officers. The police was trying to raid him. He had killed a lot of them. Then he ran away. Then the UP police caught him. They caught him in Madhya Pradesh. They were bringing him back. When they were bringing him back, again, all of a sudden, the news came in that he has been killed. When people asked the police said, "Oh, our van was punctured." Every time something is punctured, so they said our van was punctured. We took him outside, and then he started to run away, and then we had to shoot him. We had no other option. Again, people are very happy that, oh, great, police should have done this. This is a gangster. Gangster goes away anyway. He would not have been punished by the judiciary. It's good that the police gave him instant justice. So now there are these two examples on one side. Now, sorry, let me give you one other example. Third example I have is from Uttar Pradesh. So Uttar Pradesh is a place called Hathras. Now in Hathras, was what happened was a couple of girls, couple of Dalit girls apparently, were raped and then they were killed. Now what happened in this case was that the girls were raped and then killed, and there was a lot of agitation from the family members that the police is not taking any action. So what the police did was, rather than after post-mortem, rather than giving back the body of the girls to their family members, the police in the middle of the night themselves conducted the final rites, burned the body of the girls, and told the family members that your girls are gone, we can't hand over the bodies to you. This is also something that the police did. Now my question is simple. The question that I have is, if you supported the action of the police in the first two instances, then how can you speak against the police in the third case? Because the idea is, in the first and the second case also, what the police did was not as per the law. In the first case and in the second case, in both these cases, what the police did was not as per the law. You might have lied it at that point of time, it's a different matter altogether, but it was not as per the law. So when in the first two cases, police did something which was not according to law, and the police found out that the people are supporting them, people were very happy with the police, then it gives the courage to the police to do the same in the third instance as well. It gives a courage to the police to do whatever they want in the third instance as well. This is the importance of rule of law. Understand the simple idea. The idea is, when you are living in a civilized society, if you don't like the law, then change the law. But you can't say that, oh, the judiciary will not do its job properly, let the police only kill them, because that is not as per the law. If you think the judiciaries will not do the job properly, if you think in the judicial system these people will go away, if you really think that, then the idea is not that you can allow the police to do whatever you want. Then the idea is to change the law, but you can't just not follow the rule of law. The idea is, today, if you are wearing a gold chain, or you're wearing a ring, or you have an expensive phone or car with you, you can go out of your home without thinking twice that someone will come and snatch it from you, right? When you go out of your home, you don't really have this thought in your mind that, oh, I will be snatched or something wrong will happen. Why? Because you believe deep down that there is rule of law. That is what you believe, right? When you live in a society when there is no rule of law, when the police or the authorities can do whatever they want, that is not a civilized society. You might like it at that point of time, but if you think that the law is bad, then change the law. Don't give the freedom to the people to do whatever they want with the law. There is a word for this. There's a word for this. Have you heard of this? Matsnyay. Have you heard of this word? Matsnyay. Most of the people would have heard of it. Matsnyay simply means law of the sea. In a society without the rule of law, you have the Matsnyay. Matsnyay means there will always be a bigger fish to eat a small fish. In the ocean, there is no law. If there is a small fish, sorry, this is the best fish I can draw, it will be eaten by a bigger fish, who will be eaten by a bigger fish, who will be eaten by a bigger fish. That's called Matsnyay. And there are bigger fishes also, but this is all the space that I can draw in. So again, that's called much. So when you're not living in a rule of law bound society, you are living in a situation that is called matsanyay. In a developed liberal society, you can't expect to live in a world where there is no rule of law, where everyone is following whatever law that they want. That is why all these are important characteristics of the government. If you are trying to judge a government on certain parameters, whether the government is doing a good job or not, whether it is ideal governance or not, these are the parameters that we usually judge a government by. The government has to be participatory, the government has to be consensus oriented, has to be accountable, it has to be transparent, it should be responsive to the people's demand, it should be effective and efficient while spending money, it should be equitable and inclusive, and it should follow the rule of law. If it doesn't like the rule of law, then it should change. Now, in terms of government, there are a few other things that became very famous that were in the news time and time again. Ever since this government has come to power in 2014, there is a phrase that the prime minister has used multiple times. You might have also heard of this phrase: minimum government, maximum governance. It's a phrase that the prime minister himself used multiple times. Now, what exactly do you mean by this? The idea of the government when they came to power, the idea that the government propagated was that we will reduce the size of the government, in the sense that we have too many ministers, we have too many departments, we have too many different divisions. So the government said that it delays the decision making process. Their argument was that we will reduce the size, but we will increase the efficiency. That is what they call minimum government, means the size would be reduced, and maximum governance means the efficiency will increase. Has it happened? Not really, because if you look at the size of the government, it's almost the same. There is no stark difference between the number of ministers or the number of bureaucrats that we used to have earlier as compared to what we have now. So the government claiming that they would be making changes or they would be reducing the size of the government, these claims are not entirely true, but this is at least what the government claimed. The government's idea was that we will reduce discretionary powers. Discretionary power means not allowing the bureaucrats or the ministers to take decision by themselves. I'll give you a simple example. Okay, let's take a very simple example. See, even very small decisions taken by the ministers can have a huge impact. I'll give an example. Let's assume, let's assume this is Delhi and this is Mumbai. Okay. Now the government decides that we want to build a highway to connect from Delhi to Mumbai. Now there are multiple ways in which a highway can be built. So a highway can be built like this. Let's say this is number one. A highway can be built like this. Let's say it's number two. Highway can be built like this. This is number three. Highway can be built like this. Let's say number four. Or it can be built like this. Number five. Now, there are multiple ways in which all this highway can be built. Now, This simplest decision of the government or the minister who is taking the decision can have a huge impact. For example, if this highway is built, then the people whose land is here, who own the land in this area, obviously they will gain a lot of money because every highway every highway would now be flooded with the offers from the restaurants, from the hotels, from the food chain that we want to open up a franchisee here. If in case the government goes ahead with the third one, then these are the people who would be happier. So even a small decision by the government can have a huge impact. This is why the bureaucracy and the ministers have a lot of discretionary powers, because on their discretion they can actually change a lot of things. I'll suggest, if you have some time, go on YouTube and search for. There are a lot of documentaries. There is a very short documentary about the Jewar Airport. You all would have heard of Jewar Airport in Noida. You have heard of it, right? No, Jewar Airport, Noida. You have heard of it or not? At least you've heard there's an airport in Noida coming up called Jewar Airport. Okay, no worries, no worries. If you've not heard of it, don't worry. Don't worry. I'll tell you the story behind it. So the story behind it is Delhi is one of the busiest airports in India. Because it's a very busy airport, it takes a lot of time for the flights to land in Delhi. They don't really get permissions to land. They just have to hover over the airport and they take a long time to come back. It wastes time. It is a delay. It leads to delay in the flight. So government of India wanted to build one more airport near Delhi to share the workload. So they came up with this idea that there will be an airport built in Noida called the Jewar Airport. Now, Jewar is the name of a village basically. So now to build an airport or to build any big project, first step for the government is the government has to acquire the land. So for Jewar Airport, the government had to acquire a lot of land. So what the government did was, let's say there are 4 or 5 villages here. The government acquired all this land from the farmers. They were given money, and this land was acquired for the Jewar Airport. Now the people who sold their land all of a sudden got a lot of money. There are documentaries now on YouTube. If you see, all of a sudden, every house in Jewar that did not even have a two-wheeler, they have an Audi car, they have Royal Enfield bikes. Some of them have even bought Harley Davidson bikes. Some have bought Safari. Some have bought BMWs because they got all this money all of a sudden without even thinking about the future. What will we do? They just bought all this. Now, in all of this, it became so much that in the radius of 10-15 kilometers, all the two-wheeler agencies, bike selling agencies, all of them were out of stock. All that stock was sold. The cars were out of stock in the nearby areas because everyone was just buying every single thing because they got all this money. In all of this, do you know the people who were the unhappiest or the people who were the least happy, the saddest people? The saddest people were the ones who had land here. The saddest people were the one who owned land here, because they missed out very slightly. And now they are crying against the government. Oh, they did not take away our land. Our land should also be taken. We should also have gotten the money. Again, an example of how slight government decisions can actually have a huge impact. Very small government decisions can have a huge impact. Chituri is saying their land price will increase. Chituri, who will buy land on the border wall of the airport? You can't build anything on the border wall of the airport. So even if the land price increase, what will they do? Nothing. Have you seen a big building or an airport on the border of the airport, on the boundary wall? No, they have to be slightly far away. So again, that is a big problem here. So again, this is a issue of discretionary powers. When you give the discretionary powers or the powers to the bureaucrats or the ministers to decide on certain matters, the result is that many chances of corruption or many cases of corruption come up. So the government's idea was we will reduce discretionary powers. Second, the government thought of doing away with obsolete old rules and regulations, something that every government has been talking about. In India, even now we have a lot of laws running since the British era. Remember, we talked in the first class about the Official Secret Act. Remember? In the first class, we had talked about the Official Secrets Act of 1923, over 100 years old. So there are still a lot of very obsolete, very old laws, etc., that have been running up. Next, it is also appropriate accountability mechanism that the government now has to set up. Now, the government of India has been trying to ensure that we set up the accountability of officers whose actions have not been up to the mark. The government of India has been trying to tell the bureaucrats or the minister that if any of your action bring any loss to the government, bring any loss to the people, you have to be accountable, you have to be answerable. Focus on the goals as opposed to the rules. This is also a problem that we have in India. I'll give you an example. I don't know if I've shared this example earlier as well. If you see in when the COVID-19 crisis was ongoing, second wave especially, when we had to import a lot of oxygen cylinders, we had to import a lot of oxygen concentrators. Many countries sold this stuff to us, and this stuff was imported to India. It landed at the Delhi airport. For many days, it was just at the airport. It took many days for the stuff to be taken out of the airport and supplied to the hospitals. The reason was you can't just import something without paperwork. When you're importing something, bringing something into the country, it requires a lot of paperwork. The reason why this was delayed was it will take a lot of time. No bureaucrat wanted to take that chance. You might argue that, oh, the paperwork will be done later. First, bring in these stuff, supply to the hospital, then you can do the paperwork later. But no, the bureaucrat said, no, we'll follow the rules. We'll first do the paperwork, only then the stuff will be allowed inside of India. Now, many people can criticize that, but the argument by the bureaucrats was that today you will support us, that okay, don't follow the law. After 6 months, 1 year, when everything goes back to normal, people will then file an RTI against us and they will harass us that you broke the law. So, right now, what happens, all the bureaucrats, and as I said, I told this to you earlier as well, all the bureaucrats focus on rules. And you can't blame them for this because it is very cool on paper that, oh, don't follow the rule, work for the interest of the people, work for welfare of the people. It all sounds very cool, but the reality is the bureaucrat who actually has to do that, they have to evaluate whether is it worth it or not, because they know they will be the one held accountable. The government is trying to create an environment where the bureaucrats can feel safer, where they are told to follow the goal and not the rules, but it will take a lot of time for the bureaucracy to change. Bureaucracy should be an effective facilitator rather than putting a stumbling block. For example, if you have to start a new business in India, you go to the government, you ask for all the permissions, you expect the government to help you out and not create a stumbling block. Right now, when you go to government departments, ask for permission, they'll tell you, oh, bring this paper, bring this, that. Oh, you have not brought this paper. Now, nothing will happen. Your business cannot open. They don't tell you what is the alternative. They just tell you, oh, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this. So, from the first moment onward, they discourage you from opening up your own venture. That is not the task that the bureaucracy should do. Bureaucracy rather should be a facilitator, helping you grow rather than actually trying to stop you. This is the idea that the government wants to propagate in minimum government, maximum governance. Has it been done so far? I don't know. You be the judge yourself. You look around yourself. If you think these things have happened, great. If you don't think these things have happened, even then it's great. But again, you be the judge of that. Now, an important part of governance, from where the question usually are asked, and which is more important for the examination as well, is the idea of e-governance. The idea is simple: use of technology by government to reach out to more and more people. That is called e-governance. Now, if you look at e-governance, the idea is simple: use of tech. use of technology in governance to reach out to more and more people. Use of governance to reach out to more and more. Use of electronics to reach out to more and more people. Avni, you already have the PPT, you have the link of the PPT. You can go to any slide that you want. Why do you want me to go to the last slide? You have the PPT, go to any slide that you want, watch it as much time as possible. Okay. So again, the one thing that you have to appreciate with the governments in India, in the past few years at least, there has been a lot of progress towards the use of technology. We discussed this already earlier as well. Lokpal, RTI, CVC, all these are authorities or platforms where you can file your complaints online. Most of the government services today are available online. Not very long ago, there was a time when, and even today there are some people who do that, but not very long ago there was a time when people, in order to pay the electricity bill, had to go to electricity department, stand in that long queue, wait for their turn for 1 hour, 1.5 hour. Only when their time comes, and only then they would be able to pay up the bill. Now it's unthinkable. Most people now pay their bills online, be it through the apps, be it through other platforms, but most of the people do this online. Many of the people, if for example even opening up a bank account now, you don't even have to go to the bank. Your KYC etc will all be done on the video call. All this is an example of e-governance, how the government is reaching out to people. Now I'm not saying by any stretch of imagination that we have achieved everything. There is still a long way to go. There are still countries that are doing much better than us, but yes, there has been a lot of progress considering the scale of our population. The problem in case of India is you can't compare India with any country because of the scale of population. There are ideas that you really like. People say, oh, Japan is doing so well, South Korea is doing so well. But again, if an idea works in their scale of population, it doesn't mean it will work in India's scale of population. The only country comparable with India's population scale is China, and that's a very different country, so we'll not go there. Their laws, their rules, their way of living is very different. If you look at democracies around the world, the problem is it's easy to say, oh, why are we not doing what US is doing? Why are we not doing what Japan is doing, what Singapore is doing, etc. But the problem is those ideas worked at a very smaller, a much smaller scale of population. To implement that idea in our scale of population is very difficult. It will obviously take much more time in India for all these ideas to be accepted, not just the scale of population, but also the amount of illiteracy that we still have, the amount of poverty that we still have. That's why changes in India will be much more gradual. Now, if you look at last, or if you look at what exactly are the steps that we have been taking, the government of India very early realized the importance of technology as back as in 1970. In 1970, electronics department was set up. The government of India since then has been making great strides in going online and trying to give more options to the people. We set up something called NIC. Have you realized if you go to government websites, many government websites have this domain name .nic.in. Have you noticed this? .nic is a usually a name of, or the suffix of the government website name. It is a domain. NIC here stands for National Informatics Center. This NIC stands for National Informatics Center. It's set up in 1977. It's a department that basically looks into or has a responsibility of maintaining government websites. They are the ones who try and help the government maintain these websites, not just that, to update data and every single requirement that the government has. Then the government also started something called NIC-NET, that is the National Satellite Based Computer Network. For example, when the Prime Minister of India, let's say, has to do an online call with the Russian president or with the American president, like in the past few years, many summits have happened online. Multiple BRICS summits, SEO summits happened online. Do you think our Prime Minister, when he goes online to talk to Russian president, would he use Geo or Airtel, or he would share his hotspot? What do you think happens? Which network do you think are they using? Are they using the same network where you keep on telling me in the chat, sir, I can't hear you, sir, you're not clear, sir, please refresh? Do you think the same network can be used by Prime Minister where President Putin will be writing, friend, I can't hear you? No, that would not happen, right? So obviously the government would have a specific network of their own. They don't share stuff or they don't use the networks that we have. So what exactly is this? This is called NIC net. It is called NIC net or NIC network. That is what we were talking about. So NIC net or NIC network is specially a network dedicated to the government where the government communications happen. That is also something the government has been using for a long time. It has a national long distance speed of up to 10 Gbps. So again, much higher as compared to what we use, mainly connected to the state capitals, but then other cities also, from state capitals to other cities also it's connected, but at a lesser speed. What it allows for the government to do is, number one, have their information secured, because trust me, whatever you are searching online, companies know about this. Even if you're searching something in the incognito mode, remember it is all getting tracked. So just in case you think it's not getting tracked, it is getting tracked. So the government can't afford that. The government does not want its data to be shared. So government has its own dedicated network. It is much more secure, much more reliable, and the government mainly uses it. And every government has their own version of it. Our version is the NIC network. Now there are a lot of advantages of using e-governance or using technology, something that everyone would know without much explanation. It reduces delay in processing of file. And I'm not even lying. It is not many years ago when I was a kid. I still remember we used to go to electricity department to pay the bill, stand in the line. And when we reached the counter where we had to pay, there was always a dispute. They used to say, oh no, your last bill was not paid. So then they would ask us to bring the receipt. Have you ever wondered why in all of our households, even today, there is always this small leather bag or a transparent file which has so many bills and receipts that you can't even count them? Bills and receipts of LIC, bank FD, anything that your parents would have bought, even the smallest of things, there will always be that bag full of all those papers. Passbook of bank account 10 years ago, checkbook that has expired, everything will be in that pouch. Either it's a leather pouch or it's a transparent file, one of the two, right? Everyone will have it. Why is it that they keep it? For example, I have been paying my own electricity bill for the past 10 years now. I have not kept any bill. Why? Because I know I paid online, so there is a record online. I don't have to track it. I know that. Why? Because our generation has this advantage which our earlier generation did not. That is where the problem of movement of the file or processing time is solved. So e-governance basically brings in this aspect, reducing time of processing, reducing time of movement. Yashi saying multiple 10 Gbps means, Yashi, 10 Gbps basically refers to the speed of transfer of data. Multiple 10 Gbps means depends on the connection to connection. Some connection may be 20 Gbps, some may be 50 Gbps. That's what they're referring to. There are multiple backups. As I said, again, you don't need to, or at least I don't have the need to keep all this information in a file, because I know I've shared everything online. Wherever I paid the bill, I have a soft copy of it, so I don't really keep it. So there's a much lesser risk of losing out on the data. And it's not just about those bills, etc. Most of your documents now are in the online form. There is, I don't know how many of you have used DigiLocker. Have you used DigiLocker? If you have not used it, it's a great app. Please do use it. Please do use it. If you have not used it, it is very good. It's not very different than, I would say, Google Drive, but it at least allows you to have all your documents in one place. So you open up your DigiLocker app, give your Aadhaar card number, you can download most of your government documents. So that will work. Your license, your RC, your insurance, even your education certificates, etc. You can download and you can keep it there. Much lesser paperwork, reduces the requirement of manpower, space. It is few years ago that the government offices were filled up with file one over the other file. All that requirement has gone out of the window with the use of technology, and it also has cut costs. Now, cost cutting, please understand, it works in two ways. Whenever you start using any technology, whenever you deploy a new technology, initial cost will always be high. Initial cost is always higher. In the long run, it leads to cutting of the cost. Like when all these online platforms were built, you can pay a bill online, DigiLocker is being built. All that initially would obviously add up to the cost. So when you say cost cutting with the use of technology, it happens in the long run and not immediately. In the immediate sense, in the immediate time frame, you have an increase or a bump in the cost usually. It's only in the long run that the cost actually comes down. Some other advantages: service delivery is improved. Very simple example. Earlier, if you had to go to fill up or to pay electricity bill, it had to be in a specific time frame. 10 to 5 when the office opens up. So either you take a leave from your office, stand in the queue. There was no other option. Now you can pay it whenever you want. You can pay it at 12 in the night, 2 in the night when you're not able to sleep and shopping on Mintra. You can pay the electricity bill whenever you want. So all of that leads to improvement in service delivery, gives you much more options, facilitates government anytime, anywhere, means you don't have to physically be present, reduces the cost of transaction, you don't have to physically travel, much greater transparency, there's no discrepancy in the billing, etc. And it is much greater democratic engagement, means more and more people now are able to do that rather than depending upon very few people. Earlier, and even now, if you go to rural areas especially, or places where people are not aware of the fact that you can pay your bills online, there are still some shops where you go and they say we'll pay your electricity bill, we'll take 50% or 50 rupees commission. There are still many of these in smaller cities. Many shops or general stores where you can go and they will tell you that, oh, we will give you electricity bill, pay us 50 rupees commission. Our boy or our person will go, he will stand in the line for you. What they're actually doing is paying it online. But because you are not aware, they're charging a fee from you. That also has now increased democratic engagement. Yes, as Rani is saying, mobile recharge also. So I'm just taking an example of government. Mobile recharge would be in the private sector, but yes, you get the point. In the technology world, you can see a lot of these things have come online because of the government. Now, having said that, there are still issues. There is still a long way to go before large population in India accepts the use of technology or accepts the use of all these apps. Let's take some examples. First, there is a huge digital divide and there is lack of digital trust. I'll give you examples of both. I'll give you an example of digital trust first. So, and this is a personal example. One of my very close family relatives, very close to me, first relative basically, he worked in a bank all his life, retired from a bank 4 or 5 years ago. His first job was in a bank, and his entire life he was in that bank only, and he retired at a senior post. He, till date, has never used phone banking or net banking. Even today, when he has to transfer some money, he will go to the ATM, withdraw money in cash, then go to their bank branch, give the cash to the counter, and then tell them to transfer to this person. Till date, whenever he orders something online, he does cash on delivery. Why? Because he just does not trust online transfer. He just does not trust online transactions. I'm talking about a person who spent 30 years of his career in a bank. So there is still a long way to go in the digital trust area. Usually, the elder you are, the more time it will take to build that trust. And you will see that at your home as well. While most of your parents now are slowly getting comfortable, if you go to a generation higher than your parents, they would not like what is happening online. Your parents slightly may be now getting comfortable here. Not all, but some. As Karthik is saying, his dad still does not use Paytm or Google Pay. That's the problem with most of the higher generation. That is again an issue of digital trust. So it will take a long time to build that. Similar is the case of digital divide. Let me ask you this question. Let's assume there are two people in a house. There is your father and there is your mother. Okay. And your house has only one mobile phone. Now tell me honestly, what are the chances that that one mobile phone will be with your father as compared to with your mother? Who has a higher chance that who will keep this mobile phone? Most cases, again a general assumption. I'm not saying anything else. Okay, almost 100% every one of you says father, right? Father will keep it rather than the mother. Now, the interesting part is, see, I did not even give you any other detail. I did not give you any other detail. I never said that maybe mother is working, father is not working. That could have been the scenario. Maybe father is at home, mother has to travel. I did not even tell that scenario. But the general assumption that all of you had was a father will keep the phone, which is true. You're not wrong in that. You're not. That is how patriarchal the society is. So there is a digital divide. There is a very wide digital divide, and this is not just gender thing. It's a gender thing, it's a rural urban thing as well. It's a rural urban divide as well. If you actually see, as compared to the urban areas, in the rural areas the people have much lesser mobile phone, much lesser technology at their hands. And even if, let's assume that they do have mobile phone or this technology, they do not have the infrastructure to use it. For example, they do not have broadband where they can use and get online, while many of the villages are now starting to get that infrastructure, but it will still take a long time. I'll give you one more example here. And this is a true example I might have shared. If some of you are my older students, you might know about this. So there was a study done by World Bank in Bangladesh. Bangladesh is a country that has a history of huge cyclones like Odisha. Bangladesh has also had a history of huge cyclones. So there was a study done by the World Bank which found out that whenever there's a cyclone in Bangladesh, number of females who die is much higher always, almost 80-20%. 80% people who die of cyclone are females and 20% are males. So everyone wondered, why is this happening? How is it that females are much more susceptible to be killed in these cyclones as compared to males? So the study that was done by the World Bank, and the result was this, that most of these families had one mobile phone. This mobile phone was with the males. These males used to usually go out to work. Okay. When the cyclone was about to hit, the government usually send warning messages on the mobile phone. Even today, if you live in coastal areas of Odisha, Bengal, you do get these messages, warning messages from the government. So there were warning messages sent to the mobile phone. Now these mobile phones were with the males, and there was no way for them to communicate at their home because the females did not have the mobile phone. So how will they communicate with their ladies or their children at home? This was the reason that a lot more ladies or children who are sitting at home were killed in cyclone as compared to the male. So this is again an example of digital divide. How digital divide can actually have such a major impact. And unless we bridge this, we would not be able to give advantage of e-governance at a similar level to everyone in the society. So that's the first challenge. We still have a digital divide, we still have lack of trust. Problem of paperwork or proper work plan development means, in most of the government schemes, even though the government has given the option of taking advantages online, but the government still has not really been able to solve a lot of problems. I'll give you an example. Let's take an example of passport or Aadhaar also, for that matter. Now, for passport, you first have to take an appointment, then you have to go and get your document submitted, etc. Even for that, today while you can take the appointment online, but eventually you will have to go. The entire process is not online. If you actually see passport thing or Aadhaar thing also, it's not that everything is online. So the problem is government is not thinking from a bigger point of view. How can we actually make a big change in the lives of the people? Yes, small little things have become online. The government has given some small advantages to the people, but there is lack of larger vision that we can take the country forward with the use of this technology. Similar is the case of this. Narrow vision, the government doesn't think longer. Inadequacy of government process engineering. If I give you two websites, okay, and I don't tell you which one is which, let's say I open up two websites in front of you, would you be able to identify just looking at the website which is a government website and which is a private sector website? Will you be able to do that? I will not tell you which one is which, but I'll just show you homepage and I'll just ask you what do you think, which one do you think is a government website, which one do you think is not a government website? In most cases, you will be able to identify. In most cases, you will be able to identify. How? Government websites are boring, not attractive. Most of the options will not work. Most of the drop down menus will not work. As you can tell, your photo is not getting uploaded. They are not telling you how to resize the photo, etc. But you will be able to tell all of that. Apart from, obviously, as Praveen is saying, you'll have Prime Minister Modi's picture. But let's assume you don't have Prime Minister Modi's picture for a minute. You will still be able to just see how a government website looks is very different as compared to how private sector website looks like. This is where it gets interesting. So you have to understand the government, if they have to make it much, if they have to make the technology accessible to people, if they want more and more people to use this technology or make the people come online, they have to work much more on their engineering. They have to work much more on the website, on the apps, etc. Most of the time on the government app, you go put your phone number, the OTP will never come. Have you noticed this? I don't remember which one was it. Yeah, I remember now. I remember now. So this happened with me last year. So last year, what happened was, and this is again a real example. Last year, what happened was, we were trying to get a driving license made for my wife. So now what has happened in most of the states, you can get a learning license made without any driving test. So what happens? There are, first you basically get a learning license. For learning license, you don't have to drive, you just have to give a test, 10 questions of traffic signals, you identify them, you get a learning license. It's all online usually. And then basically you go for the proper license, you then have to go and give a proper test. So we were trying to get this learning license thing. Government website opened up, we gave all the details, test was done, everything was done. In the end, it said give your phone number, we'll send the OTP, and you get the OTP, you can download your license. That is what we were. I was very impressed. I was like, very good. I did not expect the government to be so good. We paid the 200 rupee fee, everything was done, and then we gave the number, the OTP never came. Trust me, I'm not lying. We tried for 3 months and the OTP never came. Every single day, 3 months we tried, the OTP just never came. Just never came. So what we did, we went to the RTO, the office, and we asked them that we have done all of this. We have even paid the fee. So I said, I'm ready to pay the fee again, but can you give me the license here? And they're like, no, we can't give it here. It has to be online. So you go home, you again refresh, and then you try. And I told them, sir, I've been refreshing for 3 months now. I can't refresh anymore. And he said, no, it has to be done online. It has been over 8 months now. We still haven't got the OTP. We still haven't got the license. So that's how the government processes are. There is no way that you can go and complain. You go to the office and they'll tell you, no, you go home, it will come online only. So again, there are a lot of challenges which the government has not been able to overcome. There are challenges that you can divide into three categories mainly: economic challenges or economic issues with e-governance, social issues, and technical issues. This part is important for the UPSC exam because questions on e-governance are very common. I'll give you some examples also. Economic issues, basically, first one, high cost. Now, the cost is again, it's there are two ways to look at this cost. First, as I said, From the government side, initial cost is higher. From the side of the consumer, also the cost is high. Means it's an assumption that we make that everyone has access to mobile phone or internet or laptop. Not everyone has access to that. So for me to use a broadband, for me to use this technology, I'll have to have some money being spent. I have to invest some money. So there is cost factor. There's also a factor of maintenance. Those who work in technical field would know better. Just if you make an app or a software doesn't mean now you can forget about it. No, it's not just a one time process. Even after you make an app or a website, you have to maintain it time and time again. Not just this, there are so many people trying to hack into the government website, trying to derive out information, trying to steal information. The government has to maintain all the security parameters, so it's not that easy. Also, there are issues of, let's say, reusability. Means are you able to use the government deck, or are you able to use this algorithm for somewhere else, for some other apps or not? All that makes it complicated, much more complicated than what we think. There are social issues. We discussed some of them. The digital divide. One other issue that we did not discuss in social issues is language issue. When you go to a government website today, it has improved slightly now. You go back to government websites a few years back, the only option was English. All the content was in English. If you did not know English, you could not do anything. Now, most government websites will give you the option to translate to Hindi. There's a button which you can click, translate to Hindi. But even today, very few government websites give you the option to translate to some other language. It's either Hindi or in English. You can't really, or you don't really have an option to go to other website, to other languages. If you are opening up a state government website, then you will have your state language. Like if you open, let's say, website of Karnataka government, you will find everything written in Kannada. But if you don't know Hindi or English, reading government documents or understanding government documents or app will be very, very, very difficult for you. Government still has a long, long way to go to make it easier for people who are not able to speak or who are not able to communicate in Hindi or English. Technical issues also remain. We discussed about the security part, privacy. Still, every few months, you keep on hearing the news: Aadhaar data stolen, Aadhaar data hacked. The data that you have given to even one single website, you have to understand that data is now in the hands of thousands of people. Have you realized this? Whenever you go to any shop, let's say you go to buy a coffee, you go and buy ration from Big Bazaar, D Mart, wherever you want. Whenever you are at the billing, they'll ask you for a phone number. Have you noticed why? What do they have to do with your phone number? They'll always ask you, sir, what is your phone number? And we'll also give that phone number without even thinking much. And then you wonder, why am I getting so many calls for credit card, man? From where did they get my number? I never applied for a credit card. But again, you did not apply for a credit card, but you gave your number to so many other places. You gave your number while billing, you gave your number while shopping, you gave your number on a random website for the OTP. The reason why they ask you for your number is not specifically because they actually want to do something. It's because they know that they can sell this data that you have. Data is today's gold. The person that has that data has everything. Yashi, that's point that you are referring to, second and third, these points are that the government using the technology has still not been able to solve big problems. For most of the things, we still have to go to government offices. Very few things have been done online. E-governance is not just about paying bills, it's not just about taking appointment. Bigger things like passport, Aadhaar, authentication, also that also should be done online, which is where the government is lacking. This is what we had discussed in this point. Some other challenges right now: information dissemination. Means spreading of information is mostly what government uses the e-governance for. They sell you messages, they give you email ID or email information, etc. There is much more that technology can do, but the government has not been able to do that. I'll give you a few examples. Voting. The government and the election commission for many years have been grappling with this problem now, that the voter turnout in India is not good. Voter turnout on an average remains 67 to 68%. Usually between 65 and 70% is a voter turnout in most of the cases. In most of usually the Lok Sabha election, at least 65 to 70% is a voter. Now, this is not good because understand this, 65 to 70% voter turnout essentially means out of three, one person is not voting. If you are voting, the person sitting towards your left or the right, one of them is not voting. So again, it's a huge number that is not voting in India. There are various reasons why people don't vote. Maybe they are traveling, maybe they don't want to go there, maybe they're not interested, etc. But again, if you use technology to, let's say, bring voting online somehow, that will obviously improve. But right now, we are not thinking on those lines. Not just this, it is especially difficult to vote for people who don't live in their own city. Let's say if my voter ID card is from Delhi and I don't live in Delhi, I live, let's say, in Mumbai, Chennai, Bangalore, Hyderabad. You don't expect me to travel all the way back to Delhi just to give a vote. It would be better if I can use some technology to vote from wherever I am. But again, right now, e governance has not reached that stage. Right now, e governance mostly is just about sharing information with the people rather than actually taking or making such an impact. Other challenges, check on corruption, improvement in transparency have been less intentional, more incidental means they have come up without as such the government trying. The government's attempt to use technology, the aim was not mainly to check on corruption. The main aim was to give more information to the people to make it easier for the people to communicate. But there have been some cases where corruption cases have come out, but the government has not really made an attempt on bringing out corruption with the help of technology. E-governance is seen as a panacea for all the government ills. Panacea means solution. Many people in the government believe e-governance or the use of technology can solve every government problem, which is not true. E-governance or the use of technology can be a facilitator. It can help you make the situation better. It can help improve the lives of the people, but you can't expect this to be the solution to all the problems in India. You can't say, oh, we don't have good hospitals, let's use technology. We don't have good voting percentage, we have poverty, let's use technology. No, technology cannot be the solution to everything. Technology can help you reach there, but the focus of the government cannot solely be on technology. This is not how all the government problems will be solved. In the past few years, you would have seen the government or heard the government at least talk a lot about this digital India. Digital India. Have you heard of this? Have you heard of this digital India? Okay. Now, while you would have heard of Digital India, you might not really have understood that Digital India actually has a lot of components as well. The government keeps on saying Digital India, Digital India, Digital India, but Digital India basically doesn't just have one meaning. Digital India means that there are 9 different pillars that the government has been working on. So government basically has talked about Digital India quite a lot. It is important for you to remember these pillars. This is the government's aim mainly to achieve digital India. Let's look at these. One first, broadband highways. Any idea what is this? Broadband highways? Any idea you would have heard of it? Broadband highways. Don't Google. Any idea what this is? Okay. No, not highways with Wi-Fi. No, not highways with Wi-Fi. Not highways. So basically, the simple idea is to give broadband everywhere in the country. So basically, the idea, and we'll just name these, number these like this, so that you can identify. First, broadband highway mean basically in simple term broadband for everyone. So broadband, sorry. So broadband for rural areas, broadband for urban areas. That is what this entire idea is. Not specifically for building highways or building broadband on the highways. It's mostly to ensure there is broadband connectivity everywhere. For example, have you heard of something called Bharat Net? Have you heard of Bharat Net? So Bharat Net basically was a government project. When the government first started it, the government's project was to build optical fiber network across 2.5 lakh villages in India. First, the government idea was to have at least 2.5 lakh villages where there will be broadband connectivity through optical fiber cable. Then a few years back, the Prime Minister announced that under this now we will be covering all the villages. So it started with 2.5 lakh villages. Now the government says we'll cover all the villages. Lump sum, again the count varies. Lump sum, the count of villages in India is about 6 lakh. So government usually takes the estimate of 6 lakh villages. So government said we'll be covering all 6 lakh villages with the Bharat Net project, means giving broadband connectivity to each and every village across the country. Anyways, second, public internet access program. Public internet access program means what? It's simple. What do you think? Public internet access program. Don't Google. Internet for everyone, telecommunication line. Okay. Any one of you here who lives in a village? Any one of you here who lives in a rural area? Anyone? Anyone who lives in a rural area? Okay. Okay. A lot of you live in a rural area. Okay. So those who live in a rural area would know this or would have heard of something called CSC, Common Service Center. Have you heard of this? CSC, Common Service Center. No problem. Try and understand this. Understand. So basically, the idea of the government is government knows that in a rural area, not everyone can have their own internet connection. Like in an urban area, you can expect everyone to have their own internet connection. You have your own personal Wi-Fi. In rural area, you can't expect everyone to have a broadband connection at their home. Even if the government provides optical fiber cable, not people will not pay the bill so that they can have internet connection at everyone's home. So the idea of the government is in every village, there should be at least one center or one office kind of a thing where there will be a computer with internet connection. It can be in the panchayat. It can be separately from the panchayat, a small office run by a government department. This is called common service center. So, for example, if you want to take government service like pay the bill, update your Aadhaar, or many government services that can be done online, if you have to take those services, you come to this center. It has a computer, it has a Wi-Fi connection, and they will help you to do that. So if in every village, government wants to set up at least one of this. In some villages, it is also done in post office. In some villages, even in the post office, you would be able to get that option. But the government wants to build common service center. This is the part of public internet. It's not about free Wi-Fi at railway stations, etc. That's a separate thing altogether. But that is basically common service program. Third, information for everyone. Any idea what this is? Number three, information for everyone. Any idea what this is? The prime example of this is government communicating with the people through social media like my GOV. This is government's communication with with the public, giving out information, public interaction. Like the prime minister has his man ki baat, it's more about public interaction. It's about sharing information on social media. So the government will use social media, etc. That is the idea of information for all. Next, early harvest program number 4. Any idea what is the early harvest program? Any idea what is the early harvest program? Think of it. What do you mean by this? Any idea? Mm-hmm. Okay. Message to farmers, trial of new technology. Okay. Think of it. Mm-hmm. So, early harvest program, basically in simple terms, early harvest program is that the government will offer the use of technology to as many places as possible. This is where you can give an example of Wi-Fi at railway stations. So, for example, Wi-Fi at railway stations, introducing biometric attendance in government offices, which many people, many government servants hate. Biometric attendance at offices of the government, Wi-Fi at universities. So there are many examples of this. Yes, you can talk about, let's say, giving Wi-Fi or giving some information to the farmers also, or even the introduction of e-books in the school. All this is early harvest program, basically trying to use technology at the ground level, at the most basic level, try to use the technology. Number 5 is IT for jobs. Simple, easy to understand. What is IT for jobs? Basically, trying to teach students, trying to teach professional technical skills so that they can be ready for jobs. For example, the government has an aim of training at least 1 crore students from smaller cities. So it's, oh, sorry. 5 is this. Sorry. 5 is this. I'm sorry. 5 is universal access to phones. I'm sorry. Universal access to phone, everyone knows, nothing really that has to be explained. Basically, everyone should have phone, and not just phone, but phone connectivity as well. So phones basically means mobile plus connectivity both. 6, as we discussed, training for IT services for good jobs, especially in second, third tier towns, smaller towns, etc. The government has made an aim of training at least 1 crore people in 5 years so that they can be better prepared for jobs and get much higher paying jobs. Number 7, e-Kranti, electronic delivery of services. Yeah. What is e-Kranti? E-Kranti, I don't think it's a very difficult thing to understand. Basically, the government offering services online. It can be, for example, education. Have you heard of MOOC or Swayam? Have you heard of Swayam or MOOC? Anyone who has used Swayam or MOOC? Anyone? Many people would have used MOOC or Swayam. So, what is Swayam? Swayam basically is a government portal where there are a lot of courses listed of top universities, great teachers. They will teach you these courses. The best part, it is free of cost. So the idea is it's free of cost. You can take the courses. If you want a certificate, then there is a fee. You pay the fee, give the test. If you pass the test, you will get the certificate. If you don't want it, you just want it for your own learning, you can just read it or attend the classes without any cost. That is called Swayam. That is e-education. There are other examples. E-justice also, for example, courts have now started accepting applications online as well. You can see some of the courts, e-court system, etc. There are also government plans like e-healthcare, you can get your medical records online. All that is an example of e-education. Okay, some people are telling me Swayam charges 1,000 rupees for certification program. Okay, I am not read that. Say I attended some of the Swayam courses just for learning, so never saw the certificate. But yes, I mean told it's 1,000 rupees. Still fine. 1,000 is not bad, yeah, for certification and the exam. Anyway, number 8, e-governance, reforming government through technology. This is the entire subject that we have been reading. Government services being offered online. You can talk about a lot of these services, government schemes, etc. It can be Aadhaar, it can be payment of bills, etc. Very self-explanatory. Bill payment, Aadhaar. Vivek, Aadhaar reprint is under this category. Government services being offered online. The last one, electronic manufacturing targeting net zero import, as again something that you can imagine the meaning of it just by reading it. The government wants to have a net zero import on manufacturing of electronics. Now, net zero means it's not that we will not import anything. It means we'll have to balance it out with the export, as simple as that. So if we are importing $5 billion, then we should export also $5 billion. That is how you have your net import as zero. So basically, you should not be dependent on others. You have to ensure that there is a lot more export that is happening. There is some progress here as well. There is some progress in the sense that a lot of mobile phones that we use in India now are made in India. Majority of them are made in India. India exports a lot of mobile phones also. Although mobile phones are lower level technology as compared to what the world requires. Right now, the entire world is focusing on semiconductor chips, so there's a lot of focus on that as well going forward. Uh, Abhijit has a good question. Abhijit is saying, what is digital stack? Is it related to e-governance? Okay, I'll tell you what a digital stack. It's an interesting thing that you should all know. Digital stack. So, what has happened is in the past few years, there is a lot of new technology built in India by the government that the government is offering kind of free of cost to the technology companies. For example, right now, when you have to use the UPI payment, you can do it through Paytm, Phone Pay, Google Pay, or whatever you want. There are other options as well. So basically, when you want to use the UPI, you want to transfer money using any of these apps, they did not create or they did not make UPI, they did not make Phone Pay or Google Pay, etc. So what happened was UPI is something that was created by Indian government. Who created it? It was created by NPCI, National Payment Corporation of India. It's a government agency. They were the ones who created UPI and they shared it with the other companies, private companies, that you can use it free of cost, don't worry. UPI is an example of digital stack. So digital stack basically means algorithm or programs or apps that the government has made and the government is happily sharing it with the private sector, hoping that they would also be able to use it so that it makes the people's life better. This is called digital stack of India. UPI is a major example of that, an invention of the Indian government that India has made, and we are happy to share it. Now, I'll give you another example of some other countries. Like when you use Google Map works on what? GPS. GPS is an invention of American military. So US military is the one that created GPS. It is their satellites, with the help of it they track all the data. They allowed Google to use it, Google Map to use it. Obviously they charge money for that. Then Google Map charges money from other companies if they want to use it. For example, if you order food from Swiggy or Zomato or whatever, when you order food, you will be able to track the person who is delivering your food. Or you order Uber or Ola, you are able to track where they are, right? How are they doing this? These companies, Zomato, Swiggy, Uber, Ola, they pay a fees to Google Map to use this, and Google Map pays a fee to US government for using GPS. That is their digital stack. UPI is our digital stack. Our government made it, and they're happy to share it with other private companies. That is India's digital stack right now. Now, there are many examples of e-government initiatives in India. There's a long list. I'm just sharing a few with you. You would have heard of all of this. MyGov, we have already talked about. DigiLocker, again, something we have talked about. There's also something called e-hospital, ORF. So basically, right now, the status is if you want to go to a private hospital or a private doctor, you can call them, book an appointment at your time, and then you can go. Same does not happen in government hospitals. If you go to a government hospital or district hospital, they will not take appointment beforehand. They'll just say, come and stand in the line. So you stand in the line and there's a lot of time that is wasted. Not just this, other problem is your medical records. Whenever you go to a new doctor, they will ask you, show me your files, show me your tests. So you have to carry all those old files and tests, right? So the idea of the government through this scheme is number one, allow the people to book appointment in the government hospitals as well, register themselves, and secondly, all your medical records will be at one place. So any doctor that you go to, when they input your Aadhaar number, they will be shown all your past medical records, so that you don't have to carry that thick file. Our parents, if they are not well, I hope they are, but if they are not well, they have that thick file of theirs that they are carrying for 10 years, right? Last 10 years, every government, every hospital that they've been to, the doctor, the prescription of the doctor, the bill, your x-ray report, ultrasound, whatever you have done is all in that one huge folder, and they have to carry it everywhere when they go to a doctor. So that will be solved with this. Then there's something called G1 Praman. Now, what exactly is G1 Praman? This is helpful in pension related cases. So what happens is, let's assume there's a government employee who has passed away. So the government employee's pension usually goes to the spouse. Let's say a pension goes to the wife, or to the same person who has retired, the pension will go to him. Now the problem is, to get your pension, you have to keep on proving after some months, after some weeks, every time that you are still alive. You go to a government office, you have to be present there, you have to prove, see, I am alive, please give me the pension. Many times you go to the government office, they will say, oh, no, no, you have died. As per our record, you have died. Someone reported you have died, now we will not give you any pension. So how do you prove you're alive? Trust me, I'm not kidding. Proving that you're alive can be the most difficult thing in Indian law. How do you prove that you're alive? Because once there is a news that comes in that you have died, and this usually happens in family disputes, I'll tell you. So these are real stories. Let's say there's a family dispute. Let's say your father had a lot of land, your father passed away, and now the land has to be divided between four children. Out of these four children, one of them goes to the tehsildar, goes to the government, gets a fake document made which says that all the three siblings have died. My three brothers have died. Now the land cannot be given to them, though I am the only owner of the land. So all the land will be given to you. Now these three will take years and years of time just to prove that they're alive. So what happens in this case is, this is where Jivan Praman comes in. You can prove this with the help of Aadhaar, your biometric. Your biometric data, you can prove with the help of that see, you are still alive and you are not dead. These are few examples. Again, there's a long list of examples. You can see many examples from the newspapers also. As and whenever the government comes in, whenever you actually have the government bringing in a new initiative, you can add to the list, but it is a big list. This is how the MyGov app looks like. This is a screenshot of the website. Even if you don't like the government, doesn't matter, at least once download the MyGov app. see what are the options, and then if you want, you can delete it after that. I'm not asking you to keep it, but at least have a look. What are the options? What is it that the government offers to the people? You can visit the website, you can visit the app as well. It has a lot of options, it has a lot of things for people to do. As I said, you can go and attempt a quiz, you can write a blog, etc. There are many competitions also, by the way, that the government keeps on hosting. There are essay competitions hosted, and there are other competitions that are also hosted on these websites. Now, whenever we talk about e-governance, there is one country that we must acknowledge and we must give an example of. There's a very small country in East Europe which is considered to be the world's first 100% digital country. That is called Estonia. Might have heard of this country. If not, no worries. Very small country, East Europe. They are considered as the world's first 100% digital country. So, just like we have our Aadhaar card in Estonia, every citizen has something called ID card. So, 90% of their population have an ID card based on which you can give services. 99% of the government services are online. Entire country has a broadband connection. 98% companies are established online. You don't have to leave your home. 99% banking is done online. Now, there are two ways to look at it. One way, you can appreciate it, the things that they have done, the reforms that they have achieved. It is great. It's an example. But as I said earlier, it's extremely difficult to look at a country and their success and then say, oh, India should also do this. Because again, the scale of the population is entirely different. India's population is actually much, much higher as compared to other countries. And that is why when you look at other countries and see, oh, they have done this, they have reformed themselves, you can't just expect India to do the same. For example, for comparison, Estonia's population is close to 13 and a half lakh. These many people are at any single day stuck in a traffic jam in Bangalore. You come to Bangalore any single day, these are the number of people who are stuck in a traffic jam. Even more than this is much lesser. In fact, this reminds me, just today, I was reading the newspaper today. Yesterday, Delhi Metro yesterday created a record of the highest number of people to ride a metro on one single day. And that record was 71 lakh. So yesterday, 71 lakh people took a ride on Delhi Metro. Means about 5 times the population of Estonia. If the entire population of Estonia traveled in Delhi Metro 5 times in one single day, that is the scale. So this is again the problem, that whenever you read about any country having great reforms, having done this and that, and you think, oh, why are we not doing this? Understand, their solutions can't be our solution because our problems are very different. Our problems are way, way, way different. And look at the other countries, they don't have that population burden. Not that we won't be able to do this, we would be able to do this, but yes, it will take some time. On that note, this is a previous year question. As I said, most of the questions that you get from this part are mostly from e-governance. So the question in 2020 was, emergence of fourth industrial revolution or digital revolution has initiated e-governance as an integral part of the government discuss. Now, if you look at this kind of a question, it looks simple yet difficult. Simple in the sense it is not asking you any complex term. Difficult in the sense you don't know what is it asking you. If you look at this question, you think it's simple, there is no difficult word written. But the difficult part is, what is it asking you? It's not even telling you what do you have to write. Write good parts, write bad parts. What exactly do you have to write? This is again something that you can't really understand. Now, in these kind of questions, what do you do? When you just have a statement from here to here and they say discuss, they are not asking you to write pros, they're not asking you to write cons, they're not asking you to write difficulty. They're not asking you to write issues. What do you write here? So when they are not asking you anything, basically go ahead and write short notes on how e-governance is relevant, how can it improve the people's life, and write a note on what are the problems right now and how is it that we can improve it even further. So again, when they are not asking you specifically what to write, focus on the good and bad part. So for example, in the introduction, I'm giving you multiple options. Again, this is not the only way to write an intro. You can write intro in any way that you want. I'm giving you three options here. We had discussed this earlier, and I will repeat this once again. Those who have not attended the earlier sessions, writing an intro, the best way should be to write either a definition or a fact. So here I've given you four different or three different definitions rather, where which you can use anyone that you can come up with, whatever you remember. See, what happens is in UPSC, the difference between UPSC and your school and college exams is in UPSC, there's no point of remembering the answer. In school and college, we used to remember the answer because we knew what question can be asked. In UPSC, you don't know what question can be asked, so there's no point of remembering the answer. You have to just be as aware as possible so that in the examination, randomly, you can come up with the definition of digital revolution. So, this is how you can define digital revolution. Now, the main body, you write the advantages that e-governance offers you. There are multiple examples that you can give, multiple advantages that you can have. As I said earlier, and repeat this once again, give examples. As and where possible, give examples. Transparency, right? RTI that can be filed online. Re- Resolution of grievances, give an example. Lokpal filed online, CVC can be filed online, something like this. Give examples of government policies. This is where newspaper reading, etc., becomes important. So, in the main body, write the advantage of digital revolution or write the advantages of what exactly can be gained out of this. Also, write about the constants of it because, again, the question specifically has not asked this to you. Don't specifically focus on one part, focus on this part as well. That is, what are the constants that are that e-governance present. Now, one more thing here. See, one of the most fun parts as a teacher is I get to read everyone's message and I get a variety of messages. Some people asking their doubts, some people telling me something, some people correcting me. Everything that you send is actually read by me, read by teachers also, or everyone. I'll just give you a personal example, a personal suggestion rather, not an example. My suggestion always is unless necessary, don't type. And I'll tell you why. The 5-10 seconds that you are spending in typing, that 5-10 seconds, you're not listening to what I'm telling you. And that can be valuable going forward. And that is true with every teacher. So, unless absolutely necessary, don't type. That's my suggestion. Again, chat box is for you. It's your right to freedom of expression. Do whatever you want, go crazy. I can't stop you. But that's my personal suggestion. If you have a question, write, absolutely right. No issues with that. If you have a question, write because it is important to get it resolved. But leaving a comment which is not a question, it would not impact, it would just waste that 10 seconds. Yeah, that 10 second of lapse in the concentration from your side would mean that you are not able to understand what I'm actually trying to tell you. So that's my suggestion. But again, you are all adults here. Go ahead with what you feel. Anyway, so now, as I said, Rishi, lack of human resources means lack of people trained in this area. So lack of trained professionals. So there are certain advantages, and these are the disadvantages. Again, what I am giving you here as a structure is a much bigger answer. You have to pick and choose the points depending upon the word limit. If it's a 150 word limit answer, you have to write lesser points, obviously. If it's a longer answer, write longer points, depends upon you. But again, adhere to the word limit as much as possible. I'm giving you many more examples than what you are required. Also, don't just leave it at 2, 3 words. Try and explain at least in one line. In one line, at least try and explain what do you mean to say. If you have any data, it will be even better. For example, if you have some data about how many villages in India don't have internet capability or internet facility, or if you have any other data that you can quote here, that would be very, very, very good. There are many examples that you can quote here. BharatNet project. Any idea what is Meghraj? Any idea? Have you heard of the Meghraj? If you have not heard of Meghraj, I'm sure you would have at least used something very similar to this. Not for not for weather forecast, guys. Not for weather forecast. Not for weather forecast. So nothing to do with weather, nothing to do with climate, nothing to do with geographical indicators. This is cloud computing, similar to Google Drive. Similar to Google Drive. So basically, cloud storage. You understand? I'm sure all of you would have used Google Drive, cloud storage, where you can store your data online. You can then basically retrieve that data wherever you go. So this is mainly cloud storage, cloud computing, where you can store your services online, so you don't really have to get that time and time again. This is again a government initiative. DigiLocker, COVID, I'm sure you would have used this for vaccines of COVID-19. My GOV. Any idea what is MCA 21? Ever heard of it? So Lakshna, Government of India. Government of India. MCA 21 is a portal of government. So this is portal of Ministry of Corporate Affairs. So Corporate Affairs Ministry basically has this portal that is for the companies to register. So if you are forming a new company, you can register there. A lot of the stuff of the companies to file their reports, communicate with the government, renewal of licenses, etc. Lot of it can be done online. This is through MCA 21 portal. These are just a few examples that you can quote. Again, you can quote your own examples. If you have more examples to quote, the one suggestion I will always have is the more recent the examples, the better it will be. So if you are, let's say, writing the answer in 2025, I would suggest not give examples of 2018 or 17. If you're writing the answer in 2025, if you have read something in the paper recently, the government has started this online initiative, that is always better. If you don't remember any recent example, then go ahead with the older ones. There is no problem with that. But give more preference to the recent examples that have taken place. And again, the more examples that you give, the better it will be. Conclusion can be the way forward of how to improve e-governance, how to fill in the loopholes, the potential it has, etc. So again, it's very generic kind of a conclusion that you can write. Questions on e-governance, or not just e-governance, to be true, basically questions on governance as a subject overall are never complicated. Most of the questions that you will see from governance are not really complicated. These are very straightforward questions based on whatever we have discussed. The only thing that you have to keep in mind while answering governance related questions is give as many current examples, relevant examples as possible, and your chance of scoring better would increase considerably. So the more examples that you give that connect your point, that prove your point, the better it will always be. Now, again, see one more question, and you can see the year. Every single year, there is at least one question from this topic. The question that we just discussed was in 2020. This question, 2019. Implementation of information and communication technology based projects or programs usually suffers in terms of certain vital factors. Identify these factors, suggest the measures. Again, exactly the same what we discussed. The content that we discuss can be used here as well. In this question, the only difference is they are specifically asking you what are the problems, or rather, what are the issues, and how to resolve these issues. So they're specifically asking you. Similar content can very well be used here going forward, which you can try and write. I've given you content for this answer as well. You can, the PPT is with you. You can see this answer by yourself. You can write it at your home. Try and write an answer. There is one more question that I have that is for your practice. Let's take a break. Be back at 7:25 and we'll resume from here. Thank you. Hi everyone. I hope all of you are back now. All right then. So far in today's class, we have discussed about the aspects of good governance. How do you define good governance? What are the characteristics that you would like to see in good governance? Some of the examples: rule of law, government being participatory, government being inclusive, consensus oriented, accountable, transparent, efficient. All these things are expected to be a part of good governance. We discussed about how the government has been at least trying to work on the idea of minimum government, maximum governance, trying to reduce the size of the government and increase the efficiency. However, there are some discrepancy and there's still a long, long way to go. We also discussed about the idea of e-governance, that is the use of technology to reach out to as many people as possible. The government has been very vocal about its support towards Digital India, which has 9 different components as we discussed. Government has also been trying to offer as many services as possible on electronic basis. However, there are some shortcomings, technical issues, issues of adoption of technology, issues that are related to the economic aspect of it. All of these still remain a problem. Now we'll go ahead and we'll start with reforms in government. Vivek is saying, do we need to showcase multiple dimensions in 10 or 15 marks? Vivek, see, it really depends on the word limit. I would not say that a lot changes between the two, just that the number of points that you will mention changes. So, for example, usually if you have a 10 marks question, that will be about 150 words. Number of points, for example, let's say you're writing pros and cons, it can be 4 and 4 each. That will be good enough. If you're writing, let's say, slightly longer answer, 200-word answer, which is 15 marks, number of points increase. I would not think that there is a lot of difference in the structure of the answer, just that the content would be more, the examples would be more, that is it. Now, the other topic that we want to discuss is reforms in certain aspects of governance, certain sectors, certain areas where we see a lot of news, where we see a lot of editorials, a lot of coverage. So, what we'll be doing is we will be covering reforms taken up by the government in few sectors. For example, we'll be talking about reforms in prison, reforms in education, and reforms in healthcare. These are the three areas where you will see a lot of news coming in, a lot of different aspects of how the government is actually trying to work, how the government is actually trying to make the lives better being covered. Vechri, Bharat Bandh will not affect the lecture. You don't have to leave your home. I will manage from the studio, so don't worry. Bharat Bandh or Asia Bandh, we will have the lecture tomorrow. Okay, unless you are planning to participate in that and you can't attend, then you can see the recording. But yes, there will be a lecture tomorrow. Doesn't matter even if there's Bharat Bandh. See, we are reading about e-governance. E-governance is the reason that you have met me and I have met you. Apart from technology, there is no reason for us to be connected. So the only thing that we can actually hope for in a Bharat Bandh is to be able to communicate with each other through technology. So all hail e-governance. Anyway, let's go ahead. The first thing that we'll be discussing is prison reforms in India. Now, if you look at the idea of the prisons in India, it has been a lot in the news, and there are a lot of different aspects of the debate of prison reforms in India. We discussed about this earlier, and I'll repeat this once again. The entire idea of people in the prison not being treated well. The problem here is that it is never at the top of our priority list. Whenever you ask, or for example, if I ask you to make a list of 15 problems that India is facing, and rather than 15, I'll ask you to make a list of 20 problems that India has that we should correct. It's very rare that out of the top 20, one of your problems will be ill treatment of the prisoners. Ill treatment of prisoners or prisoners not being given their due share in terms of their rights has never been in our minds. Because the general idea is if someone goes to the prison, you forget about the person. Your idea or your point of debate will be let the government focus on people who are outside the prison. After that, the government can focus on people who are inside the prison. But right now, let the government focus on people outside the prison. So, what has happened is there are few reforms in the prison system that have been introduced, but there's still a long, long, long way to go. Our prisons are facing a lot of issues. Some things have changed, and many things have still not. First, what is the purpose of prison and how has it differed or how has it changed over the years? Earlier, especially when the British were here, the idea of prison or sending anyone to prison was to punish them for what they did, to punish them for the act, to basically take revenge from the person. That if you did something wrong, you will be sent to the jail. That is our form of revenge as a society. However, more recently, how the prisons are being seen, that is changed. Now, the prisons are mostly seen as corrective or improvement facility. For example, there are two words that you have to understand: reform versus retribution. What exactly are the prisons meant for? Reforms or retribution? Retribution means revenge. Do you send someone to prison because you want to take revenge from them for what they did? Or do you send someone to prison because you want them to become a better human being so that they don't repeat what they did? That's a big debate. In modern societies, more and more countries, liberal countries, are moving towards the idea that prisons are meant for reforms and not to take revenge. In fact, that is why in a lot of countries you will see that death penalty has been abolished. Many countries have actually abolished death penalty. And the reasoning is the same. If you give death penalty to the person, there's no chance of reformation. If the person himself or herself is not alive anymore, how do you reform the person? You can only reform the person when the person is still alive. So, a lot of countries, especially in Europe, have removed the idea of death penalty altogether. India still has death penalty, although used very rarely, but India still has death penalty. So the idea is that the prisons are meant more for reforms, and that is why increasingly you will see the prisons changing in India. For example, if you go to, I don't mean to say you go to, but if you read about, let's say, Tihar prison or the Tihar jail in Delhi, if you look at the Tihar prison or Tihar jail in Delhi, you will see a lot of workshops happening for the prisoners, teaching them different skills, teaching them skills based on certain, let's say, carpentry, so that they, when they come out of the prison, they are able to earn, they are able to be a part of the society. That is how the prisons have changed over the years. Now, in India, there are a lot of problems in prison. Let's try and understand those issues first. First, huge pendency of cases. So much so that 67.2% of India's prison population is just under trials. This is a big number. Let's try and understand this. There are two types of people in the prison: one, under trials; second, convicted. Under trials are people on whom the case is still going on whom the case is still ongoing. Means a case was filed against them, the case is going on in the court, and for that time period, they are in the jail. They will remain in the jail till that time period that the case goes on. Convicted are the people on whom the crime has been proven. So they are serving a sentence. Now, the jails are made for convicted people. The jails are made for people whose crime has already been proven, so they can start their punishment. The problem is majority of people in India's prisons, two-third. Just imagine, out of 100 people, 67 in jail are those on whom the crime has not even been proven. There is such a huge population of under trials in the prison. 67.2% of prison population is just under trial, which is a huge number. And add to that one more very unique problem. Do you know many of these under trials are those who are in the jail for such a long time that if their crime would have been proven, even then they would not have been given so much of punishment. I'll give you an example. Let's assume someone is in the jail under trial for a kidnapping case. Okay. If it was proven that the person did commit the kidnapping, let's assume the maximum punishment would have been 7 years only. That the maximum punishment. But the person is in the jail waiting for his case to get over for over 7 years already. He is already in the jail for over 7 years. The case is still going on. If on the first day the court would have said you are guilty, he would have been out by now. That is a problem that we have. Now, what does it lead to? It leads to prisons being overpopulated. See, in an ideal society, prisons should not even be required. What are prisons? Prisons are places that you keep to restrict people's freedom because you think they are a danger to the society. In an ideal society, you do not even need to have prisons. Making a prison is just a waste of public land. You are not using it for anything productive. It's a waste of public land, it's a waste of government resources to run and operate a prison. But still, we have so many prisons right now with so many prisoners that they're actually overflowing. Most of the laws in India about prison are colonial and obsolete. Now, this is where government has made a change. Few months back, the government of India passed a Model Prison Act. Few years back, the Model Prison Act was passed. Now, it's interesting to understand this. Prison is actually a state subject. So the first question is, if it is a state subject, how can the central government pass a Model Prison Act? It depends on the state. The states make their own rules. So how can the central government do that? So the idea is, number one, central government made this law which will be applicable to union territories. Because for union territories, as you know, the central government can make a law on the state list. So central government made this law which actually would be applicable to union territories, number one. Secondly, government making a model law for state subject is nothing new. The governments usually do that. So the idea is central government makes what you call as a model law. Then they send a message to the state governments. The message is that we suggest you adopt the same law. We suggest you pass same law, copy paste this. If you don't want this, then it's up to you. But as the central government, as the elder brother, we can suggest you. We suggest you this is the model act that we have made. After talking to a lot of experts, you can implement this in your own state. Then it depends upon the state government whether they want to implement this or not. So that is how model acts usually work. It's not necessary it has to be implemented. It's a state subject thing. States decide, central government can just advise. Other issues, inhumane behavior. This is a reality. Prisoners are not given a lot of attention. In the next class, most probably day after, on Monday, in fact, one class after this, on Monday, we will be discussing National Human Rights Commission. When we'll talk about National Human Rights Commission, you will see one of the most important jobs or the primary responsibility of National Human Rights Commission is to inspect the prisons. They undertake inspection of the prisons. They are the ones who look into the inhumane conditions into this. Amit, tomorrow is not a holiday. Correct? Tomorrow is not a holiday, guys. Tomorrow we have one more class. And HRC is next, not next module, next to next. That's why it's on Monday. So no, tomorrow is not a holiday. Please, no band, nothing. We are meeting here. Then the prisons are overcrowded. Take an example of the Tihar jail. In 2020, it was reported Tihar jail's capacity of 7,000, while the number of people in Tihar are 15,000. So twice, over double the number of people that are supposed to be in the jail exist in the Tihar jail right now. When you have more people, obviously the facilities cannot accommodate them. It leads to more clashes amongst the prisoners. It leads to a more problematic situation where you will see inside Tihar lot of attacks taking place between the prisoners attacking each other, killing each other. Again, the idea is that overcrowding is extremely dangerous. And the solution is what? Do you think the solution is to build more prisons? No. The solution cannot be to build more prisons. I'll give you a real example that you can quote in the exam also. Last year, so 2022, on the Constitution Day. So Constitution Day is 26th of November. Usually, Constitution Day is organized by Supreme Court. This is a usual kind of a convention that the Supreme Court organizes a function on the Constitution Day. They invite Prime Minister, President, they meet, they make a speech, etc. So 2022, last year, November 26, President of India made a speech in the Supreme Court on in this function. She said she was talking specifically on this issue. She said that our prisons are overflowing with the number of prisoners, but the solution is not to build more prisons. She specifically said the solution is to improve our judicial system, give bail to people who are in the jail without any offense. We should focus on making or bringing people out of the prison if they're not convicted for so much or for so many years. Give them bail, release them, don't force them in the prison, don't build more prisons just for that. That is what our president said. Other idea is inadequate staff. And again, there are multiple examples. This is an example that you can give. For example, if you can't read it, let me switch off my camera for 2 seconds. In 2020, the Puzal Central Prison in Chennai had only one guard for every 100 prisoners. Now imagine when you have one guard for 100 prisoners, how difficult it would be for that guard to keep a control on the prisoner. This is just a few examples. Now, this is a data graph that was published in the Hindu newspaper some time back, which I've taken for you. This blue line tells you the capacity of prisons in India. So, total capacity, as you can see, is lump sum 4,25,000. This is the actual number of prisoners. Actual number of prisoners close to 5,55,000. So if you actually look at the occupancy rate right now, it is 130%. 130% is the occupancy rate right now, which means our prisons, wherever there was supposed to be 100 people, we are accommodating 130 people. In the cells where about, let's say, 10 people are supposed to be kept, 13 people are being kept, which is a problem in our prison system. Now, this is not a problem just with India. Let me clarify that. Let's not assume this is only happening in India. Around the world, this is a big problem. What to do with the prisoners? What exactly do we have to ensure so that the prisoners are kept in the best possible manner? There are certain international conventions that we have taken up. The international convention started in 1948. In 1948, we had the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. That was the first ever human rights declaration anywhere around the world. It took place in the UN. In this declaration, when the world talked about human rights, they also talked about the human rights of the prisoners. That was, again, remember, this was an era of post World War II. A lot of soldiers were taken prisoners by other countries. This was the background of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which says that no one shall be subjected to arbitrary arrest, detention, or exile. Everyone should be presumed innocent until proven guilty. Similarly, we have 1975 Declaration on Protection of Torture. We also have the UN General Directive. All these are international conventions for the right of the prisoners, for the right of those who have been detained, because this is a universal international issue and not just an issue that India has been facing right now. What are the reforms that have been suggested? Supreme Court appointed a committee called Justice Amitav Roy Committee a few years back to address the issue of overcrowding of prisons. This is what they suggested. First, they suggested speedy trial. Now, something that everyone knows, speedy trial means if there is a case going on for an under trial, please decide that quickly so that you can actually decide whether the person has to be kept in the jail or not. Not having speedy trial or not deciding the case in a swift manner becomes the primary reason why we have overcrowding of prisons. Second, there should be at least one lawyer for every 30 prisoners, which is not the case at present. Lack of lawyers or lack of good quality lawyers means even if you are in the jail and you should be getting your bail easily, you are denied the bail because your lawyer or you don't have a lawyer who can represent you. Your lawyer is not qualified enough or your lawyer is not experienced enough to make your case. That is why, and it's a worldwide phenomena. If you look at the number of people in the prison, there are disproportionately higher number of poor people in the prison anywhere in the world. Anywhere in the world, in the prison, if you look at their population, a majority of them will always come from poor background. Now, you might say, sir, because they are the ones who commit more crime. That may be true. But that's also because they are denied the bail more often than not. Richer, influential people can afford to have better lawyers, can afford to have more experienced lawyers, as compared to the lawyers that are affordable to the lower section or the poorer section of the society. Fast track courts should be set up and consular plea bargaining should be promoted. Now, India does not have a law of plea bargaining. If you are someone who watches US or European movies or TV series, you might have heard of this phrase, plea bargaining. Anyone who does not know what this is? Anyone who has not heard of this, what is plea bargaining? Okay. Okay. I'll tell you what this plea bargaining. Okay, I'll tell you what plea bargaining is. Let's assume there's a person on whom police has filed a case. Okay, so let's assume there's a person on whom police has filed a case. Now, this person has police says that you have committed a crime, and your crime will give you maximum, if proven, you will get maximum 10 years of jail. Okay. Now the police gives you an option. Police says, accept that you have committed the crime so that you don't have to hire a lawyer, your money will be spent. Except you have committed a crime, we promise you we will only give you 3 years of jail and not 10. This will save time. You accept that you have committed the crime. There is no need for the case. There is no need to hire a lawyer. You go to jail, start your sentence. After 3 years, you are out. Otherwise, you will be in the jail for so many years. Your case will go on and on and on. There will be money spent. Lawyer will be involved. You will never get a bail. That is called plea bargaining. So you can bargain with the police basically. That's what happens in the US. You bargain with the police that, okay, I will accept my crime, but in return, I want a lesser punishment. That's called plea bargaining. That I will accept to the police, yes, I've committed the crime, but in return, the police has to also promise lesser punishment will be given to you. In India, we don't have this crime or this law rather. In India, there's no law like that. Even if you accept you have committed the crime, you will be given the same punishment. In US, it is done so that you don't waste a lot of time of the judiciary. You don't involve lawyers, you don't spend the money. So this is again a suggestion that this committee gave, that plea bargaining should be promoted, should be made into a law in India. That has not been done so far. Also, if you look at state wise data, again some states have too much prison population. Chhattisgarh, 234%. In a place of 100 people, they have locked up 234 people. Delhi, 227. In a place of 100 people, they have locked up 227 people. The problem again is the number of people who are ready to work, who are ready to actually work in favor of these prisoners, who are ready to fight for these prisoners, that is very, very low across the entire country. We do have something called Nalsa. In Indian polity, you would have read about Nalsa, right? Did you read about that? In Indian polity, you all would have read about Nalsa. Okay. So just a recap very quickly. Just a recap. NALSA is the National Legal Services Authority. Works at the national level. Then you have at the state level, State Legal Services Authority, SALSA, then district level, etc. Now, what they do is they provide you free legal aid. Now, please understand the working of NALSA for 1 second to understand how it works. Now, NALSA says we will give you a free lawyer. So NALSA will contact a lawyer and they will ask the lawyer, please fight this case for free. Now, if you are the lawyer, you are ready to fight the case. How interested would you be in fighting the case if you're not being given any money? Just think about that. As a lawyer, how interested would you be to fight the case if you're not given any money? Would you really try your 100%? Would you really think, no, 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 I have to work very hard. I have to work very hard. I'll give you one more example. If you are a CA, if you're a CA, the client that actually comes to you, pays you money, you will do their calculation or file their taxes in a much more professional manner. On the other hand, a friend of you and a friend of yours calls, hey man, please help me save taxes. Please do that. How much time would you spend in actually trying to save the taxes of that friend who you know will not pay any money, as compared to a professional who is actually paying you money, who is actually looking into or actually buying you services professionally? So that is again a difference. So on the other hand, yes, someone is saying Nalsa does pay some money. Nalsa pays money, but they don't pay a lot of money. It's very, very little. I I'm not sure if you know how much the lawyers actually earn. I'll give you an example which I give other students as well, just to tell you how much the lawyers earn. Okay, I'll just give you a real incident and you calculate. So in 2014, Congress lost the election, BJP came to power. So Congress members had to vacate their government bungalows. So Congress had a minister called Kapil Sibal, very famous Supreme Court lawyer. So Kapil Sibal vacated the house. So what happened was Kapil Sibal then rented a house, and it came in the paper that Kapil Sibal has rented a house in Delhi. There's an area in Delhi called Lodi Road. He rented a house, and the rent was 16 lakh per month in 2014. That was the rent that he was paying. Now imagine a person who is paying this much rent, how much would he be earning? How much would that person be earning if he is paying a rent of 16 lakh per month? And that's 10 years back. So if you are at the top of your game, lawyers earn ridiculous amount of money. You can't even imagine how much lawyers earn. So if you are having second thoughts about your UPSC preparation, you're looking for a backup, you know which backup you have to go to. So anyways, now if you actually see, NALSA does pay a very, very, very small token amount to some of the lawyers. But can you compare any good lawyer's fee as compared to what the NALSA would be ready to pay? So even though you have NALSA, even though there are laws that says you will get free aid, first of all, it's not available to everyone. Under NALSA also, there are strict rules who will get legal aid and who will not get legal aid. So there are rules about how much you are earning. Even if you're lower middle class earning 25, 30,000 per month, you will not get free legal aid. So again, free legal aid also, it's not something that is universal. So the amount of effort that people and money people have to spend to get a bail is extremely, extremely high. These are the issues with the prison right now, the prison sector part. Then we come into the second sector where we want to focus on, that is the issues, healthcare sector. Now, it's no secret that India's healthcare sector is not great. Before we dive deeper into it, let me first make a disclaimer here. The issues that we will be talking about in the healthcare sector are mainly public healthcare, not private. We are talking about issues in public healthcare, means government hospitals, government districts, etc., district hospitals, etc. Because the reality is, if you have the money, if you can afford good doctors, then there is no problem with you. India does not have any lack of good doctors. The problem is they cost a lot of money. So if you have money, you go to private sector, then none of these problems will apply to you. The problems that we will be discussing in healthcare sector, the problems that you discuss in healthcare sector, lack of infrastructure, lack of doctors, etc. All these are problems in the public healthcare sector. If you go to private healthcare sector where you can afford to pay the fee, then there is no issue. You go on with your own happy married or your happy life. You don't have any issues with that. So let's start with the healthcare sector, the issues. Every one of you would be aware of this. First, the biggest one, inadequate medical infrastructure. Again, I am not talking about the private sector. In the private sector, if you have deep pockets, there is no lack of infrastructure for you. Everything will be at a silver platter. We are only talking about the issues mainly in the public health sector. So, first, lack of infrastructure. We have zero point 0.9 beds per 1,000 population. Only zero point 0.9 bed, not even one bed per 1,000 people. We all got to see what happened in COVID-19 crisis. Hospitals were overcrowded. There was no way for you to know if the hospital beds are available or not. People inside the hospital were not able to manage the crowd. Yes, every country was overwhelmed at that point of time, but our healthcare infrastructure especially cracked under that pressure. Out of that, even more problematic is India's over 60% of population is still in the rural areas. 60%, more than that, part of our population is still only in the rural areas. Even then, only 30% of our hospital beds are in rural areas, which is a huge discrepancy. The bigger chunk of our population, close to two-thirds of our population in India, only has access to 30% of the beds. We saw this again in the COVID-19 crisis. When the COVID-19 crisis, we saw people in the rural areas specifically just not being able to afford a bed, not being able to reach the hospitals in most of the cases because they did not have any resources. Lack of standardized quality care in the private sector, the care that you get by paying money is much higher, much better as compared to the government hospitals. If given a chance, and everyone will agree to this, if given a chance, if you have the money to afford it, no one will like to go to a government hospital. Everyone knows it. Maybe except AIMS. AIMS is a special case altogether. Government spends a lot of money in AIMS on research, etc. But if you leave apart AIMS for now, generally, if you have the money, if you are able to spend that money, you would not opt for a government hospital over a private hospital because we all know the quality care and the standard of service delivery is much higher in the private sector. Non-communicable disease is a big problem. See, the human tendency is we are always more scared of those diseases which spread from human to human, like COVID-19, then let's say AIDS. We are always much more scared of these. Let's say swine flu. All these are the diseases that we are much more scared of. But the reality is, many more people die due to non-communicable diseases. Non-communicable disease, for example, let's say heart issues, diabetes. All these are non-communicable diseases, and our focus has just not been on these diseases. Why is it important for the government that the people should remain healthy? Understand this. Why should the government care if I am healthy or not healthy? The government should care because of two reasons. First, if I am not healthy and I am going to a government hospital to get myself treated, that means I am an expense for the government. In a government hospital, the government has to spend money, pay to the doctors, pay for infrastructure, medicine, everything else. If I am not well, if I am going to a government hospital, that means that I am a burden on the government financially, number one. Secondly, if I am going to a government hospital or I am not working because I'm ill, that means I'm not contributing to the GDP. I will only contribute to the GDP if I am able to work. That also becomes a big problem. There is lack of adequate mental health care infrastructure in India. As a society, thankfully, we are becoming more acceptable to the idea of mental diseases. We are becoming more acceptable to the idea of people suffering from depression. We are more acceptable to the idea of counseling, but there is still a long, long, long way to go. In a majority of India, if you tell people, oh, I had depression, the first reaction would be, oh, let's watch a movie, it will all be good. Let me tell you a joke, it will all be good. For boys, it will be, oh, let's go for a drink, it will all be good. Come, let's go outside, have some fresh air, it will be good. Because that's how people perceive depression to be. But that's a proper disease which needs treatment. In India, mental health infrastructure, especially on the government side, is very, very, very poor. There's a lack of doctor patient ratio. Again, this lack of doctor patient ratio again has an issue in the public health sector. If you have the money, the doctors, there is no dearth of doctors. The dearth of doctors is only if you are dependent on the government hospital. So WHO recommends WHO recommend there should be one doctor every 1,000 patients. There should be one doctor every 1,000 patients. Now, sorry, not patient, but 1,000 people. In India, we actually have a ratio of one doctor to 11,000 people, which is over 10 times what WHO has prescribed. Most of these can be attributed to the problem of population. Most of these can be attributed to the problem of population. Because if you reduce the population, if you control the number of people that the government has to offer the services to, if you reduce that, the services will automatically improve. Imagine this, you're going traveling in a bus, the bus is overcrowded, 100 people, only 60 seats, but 100 people in the bus. How would you feel? And now, the same bus, if it has only 15 people traveling, it's all fine. The problem that you had with the bus was not the bus as such. The problem that you had with the bus was that there were 100 people around you and you did not have a seat, you did not even have the space to stand. If the same bus now is carrying only 15 people, you are one of them, you're all happy traveling. So the problem in most of the cases can be solved through population. That is why the government has to focus on educating people about family planning, educating people about how exactly do they need to curtail population. One other thing in expenditure of health or people spending on their health, one other aspect that you have to understand is there's something called OOPE. OOPE stands for out of pocket expenditure. In India, taking a medical insurance is still a very rare thing. Although it is increasing, if you work in if you work in the formal sector now, most probably your employer will give you the health insurance. But if you are not working in the formal sector, then you don't get or you have to buy health insurance on your own. Still, a lot of people in India don't have a health insurance of their own. Now, that is a very big problem because when you don't have a health insurance of your own, that means if you fall ill, you have to go to a doctor or hospital. Your out of pocket expenditure means how much you pay from your own pocket is very high. If you look at any developed country, One of the common things in all the developed countries is out of pocket expenditure is almost zero. In the US, almost everyone has a health insurance. In European countries, also almost everyone has a health insurance because they all know if they fall ill and if they have to go to the doctor hospital, it will cost them a lot of money. In India, the reason why people avoid going to hospitals, you would have all seen it in your own household. Someone falls ill, you ask them to go to doctor, they're like, oh, why do you have to go to doctor? He'll give us the same medicine. We all have that one white box, transparent plastic box in our home where we have kept all our medicines, unfinished medicines from our last disease. We just open up that box, pop up a tablet, and we think everyone will be fine. Or you call a friend and you ask him, bro, you also were sick, right? Which disease, which medicine did you take? And you take the same medicine because we think, oh, what will the doctor tell us? He wasted 5 years for doing MBBS. I know more than him. So you don't go to a doctor. But one of the other reasons why people avoid going to doctor is out of pocket expenditure is very high in India. You don't have your own health insurance. You have to pay from your own pocket. So people avoid that. Government has been trying to change that. For example, Ayushman Bharat scheme is a prime example of this. Ayushman Bharat Yojana, where the government is trying to expand the scope of health insurance, ensuring that more people have health insurance in India, is an attempt to do that, to encourage people to take insurance so that they don't have to spend out of pocket. That will also improve. Also, when you have insurance, you can go to private sector as well. If you think you have to go to private sector, you can do that if you have health insurance. These are some of the suggestions. The first and the biggest suggestion that has been given by many people is government has to improve spending on healthcare. Right now, health when we had the COVID-19 crisis where the government increased healthcare spending, that was also, but mainly was to buy vaccines. But the healthcare infrastructure as such is still very, very, very low quality. Then affordability of healthcare, which is high quality, has to improve. Mental health services have to improve. Also, try and reduce the inequality between public and the private sector. One more thing, the government can look into tax reductions for those who are investing in medical infrastructure. Those companies which are trying to research new ways to find out new cures of diseases, they deserve certain tax break from the government, they deserve certain tax reduction. This is the only way in which we can ensure that the companies don't hesitate before spending money. If the companies know that the government is still backing them, they can spend a lot of money because see, research of any new kind requires huge amount of money. When you are spending money, you are never sure if the research will be successful or not. If the research is unsuccessful, all that money will go to waste. The government should have the backing of these companies. Only then you will have new inventions coming up. Why do you think there is no new invention or very, very few new inventions in India, especially in the field of healthcare or science? That's because spending on research requires a lot of money. If I spend 1,000 crore rupees, I should have this confidence in my mind that even if I fail, the government will give me 1,000 crore rupees more next time to again go and spend. If the government says, oh, you wasted all that money next last time, why would I give you money? That means you are not giving encouragement to research as much as you should. And that becomes a problem. In Western countries, US, etc., because of their deeper pockets, they give a lot more support and funding to research. Why do you think that COVID-19 vaccine, the first proper dependable COVID-19 vaccines came up in the US? Why is it that Pfizer and Moderna were the ones that came up with the first effective COVID-19 vaccines? It was because they had a lot of funding from the government. The government of the US gave them billions of dollars. They told them, don't worry, go and find a cure. Even if you fail, we will not ask for the money back. You go and do your research. When you give this confidence, only then you have amazing results. This is again an issue that governments face. Unless you open up your pockets, there will be no groundbreaking research to come out. Whew. As always, Mr. Vivek trying to correct me. Sputnik 5 was the first. Vivek sir, that is why I specifically said first reliable vaccine. I think you did not hear the word reliable. No worries. Here probably from the next time. The first vaccine that you are referring to, Sputnik 5, was not reliable. It was not taken by anyone. Eventually, no one took it. It had to be the first reliable one. Okay. Now, this is a practice question that you can have from this part. Try and write an answer to from the healthcare system part. That is, challenges that we are facing in the healthcare system and the measures that could be used to improve the quality. So, if you actually see, this is a question which you can easily answer depending on whatever we have discussed so far. And again, give as much data and examples as possible. We have enough data in whatever we have discussed, data about, for example, number of hospital beds. We have data about number of doctors. All these can be used here, and you can give suggestions. Suggestions again are based on this slide. You can talk about suggestions, give examples of how the government should expand. Let's say expanding the scope of Ayushman Bharat Yojana. All these can be written here in the answer to this particular question. The next sector in which we would like to discuss reforms is the education sector. This is also one of those areas from where you very often keep on seeing questions in the examination. That is, the government taking out reforms in the education sector. What is it that the government has done? Any new initiative? Again, in the education sector, also the same thing applies. The problem that we will be discussing, or the problems that are usually seen in the education sector, also are in the public sector. The sad reality is, if you have the money to afford, you would not have any problem in the quality of education if you are focusing on the private sector. If you have the money to afford, there are the best of the schools in India. You can even go abroad. There are best of schools and colleges available for you. So all the issues that we have, mainly in the education sector, also are confined to the public sector space and not overall. Same was the case with healthcare. Don't compare public with the private, because the private one is leaps and bounds ahead of it. They have much more investment. They have much more money to put in. Now, in terms of education, the big thing that came up in the past few years, the government of India released the new education policy, the third education policy that we have. The first one was in 1968, then 1986, and now this education policy. Now, if you look at the education policy, please understand the fact that policy is not a law. Policy and law are very, very different. Policy is what the government says that we will try and achieve that. Policies are not binding. So if the government has introduced a policy saying that we will open these many schools, or we will have this and we will change this, etc., this is not binding. It's not that it will be followed automatically. Only when the government makes a law about it, when the government passes a law about it in the parliament, then it becomes binding. So the reforms that you saw in national education policy this time around also, it's not that they are all binding and they will happen. Some of them may happen, government may do that, may convert them into laws, but some of them may never happen, because again it is not binding. Policies are just vision documents, they are not binding documents. The idea of the policy is to bring back the children who are out of school, have more options available for children, focus more on vocational training. This is something which our education system has been lacking for some time now. For example, if you go to a country such as, let's say, Norway, Finland, what they have done is like we are taught in our school how do the chairs work, what are the forces when you sit on a chair, what are the force components. When you prepare for IIT JEE, you are told there are two monkeys. They are pushing the pulley. One end of the pulley, there's one monkey, there are two monkeys on the other side. Then you have to calculate different types of tension and force, etc. We are taught all of that. But to the same student, if you ask him, can you actually make a chair? If I give you a hammer, I give you wood, would you actually be able to make a chair or not? In most cases, the students will not be able to do that. And we can't blame the students for that. It's just that they have not been told. They have just been taught how does the chair work, what are the forces on the chair, does that. But the practical knowledge, how to build a chair, how to build a table, how to use the tools, that is something that has not been focused on in India. This is something where the other countries are leaps and bounds ahead of us. This is called vocational training. National Education Policy recently released focuses on vocational education from class 6 along with internships as well. Now, there are a lot of issues in our education system. Again, when I say issues, I am focusing on public sector issues. First, all of you are aware, lack of infrastructure in the schools. Only 12% schools in 2019-20 had internet facilities. Only 30% have computers. And even in this, most of it is actually the private sector schools. Government schools don't have any facility for using internet or for computers. 42% schools lacked furniture, 23% did not even have electricity, and even the washroom facilities were not present. In fact, there have been multiple surveys done which show that one of the biggest reasons why girls drop out of school after, let's say, class 7th, 8th is the lack of sanitation facility, lack of washroom. Even if there is a washroom, there are no separate washroom for girls. And it's not just schools. In fact, if you Google a few months back, Chief Justice of India was making a speech in which he said that in the local judiciary, you go to district courts or lower courts in India, many of them don't have a specific women washroom. So if the courts themselves don't have women washroom, how do you expect even the government schools to have something like this? We have a high dropout rate as well, where the students drop out because in most of the government schools, the children that study, they come from families where children are seen as a potential earning member. One of the reasons why we see higher population rate amongst poor section of the society is that the poor section of the society, when they have 4 children or 5 children, they view them as a potential earning member who can go and work around the house, who can actually earn some money. Even if they earn 100 rupees in a day, that's an added income to the family. So for that, they drop out of the school. The one good part is schemes such as the midday meal scheme have improved the enrollment ratio with more children coming in, maybe attracted by food. But after a certain age, class 8th, 9th, you see a high dropout rate in India. There's the problem of brain drain at a higher education level, which you all know. After getting education, a lot of people prefer going outside to earn better money, to have better opportunities, to earn a better career. And there's still mass literacy. See, there are two ways to look at literacy debate now. One, when you see India's literacy, let's say 76%, for example, you believe, oh, 76% is not bad, right? When you say India's literacy rate is 76%, you say it's not bad. But look at it from other point of view. When you look at it from other point of view, that is 24 to 25% people are still illiterate. That is a big number. That's still a big number. And again, literacy has a lot of different aspects. Even the people who come in the category of literate, that does not mean they're employable. There's a difference between the two. Basic literacy is something else. But just because you have basic literacy, you will not get a job. Getting a job means you either need to have some specific technical knowledge or you need to have some skills on your own that you are able to use to earn the money for the company. Basic literacy will not cut that for you. So even in the basic literacy level, in that debate also, we are still lagging with the government has to focus on. Lack of vocational technical training, unaffordability if you are opting for private or higher education or good schools or colleges. Take an example of medical. If you want to become a doctor, pursue MBBS, there are very few government seats first. If you go to private sector, you can easily spend over 1 crore rupees for MBBS degree. Do you know that? I'm sure most of you know this. If you are going, and these are not even the highest quality colleges I'm talking about. MBBS government seats are very limited. So in the private sector, you have to spend so much money. That is why you will see so many students in India who want to pursue MBBS going to countries such as Ukraine, Russia, Belarus. Have you heard this? You would have seen ads in the papers going to these countries. Why? To pursue MBBS, to pursue the medicine, because they are just not able to afford that in India. If you go to these countries and add every expenditure of your education, expenditure of your food, living there, even all of that would be lesser than what you have to spend in India. That is also something the government has to focus on. There is gender inequality as well. At all the levels, you will see women participation in education being lower, women dropping out, the girls dropping out of the school in larger numbers. There are still issues of dowry, there are still issues of early marriage, because of it, the women are not able to compete in the schools or colleges as much as they should. This is the way forward. The way forward system is implement what the national education policy says, move away from 10 plus 2 system to 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4 system. Any idea what is this? Any idea what is this? Have you heard of this while the national education policy was introduced? Mhm. Any idea? So what the government basically did was, so yeah, this is the national education thing. So basically what the government did was, the government said that the students learning should be divided into different levels. For example, 5 means first 5 years should be on building foundation, on building foundation. So building foundation basically means that you should not have to introduce books, etc. You should not really have to introduce any books, etc. to the children. Just teach them, for example, in terms of stories, in terms of good habits, moral science, etc. So this will be, for example, till class 2. Till class 2, no books, etc. Then comes 3 next year. So that will be class 3 to class 5. So when you focus on class 3 to class 5, that is when basically you prepare them. And then there will be a different education system from 8th to 6th to 8th, and then from 9th to 12th. So basically, that is the division that have different levels. Basically, have the foundational level, then have the preparatory level, prepare them, then middle school, and then secondary school. Now, again, as I said, this is something that the national education policy suggested, but this is just policy, not law. That is why you are suggesting that the government should improve this. Government should focus on value and ethics education as well. Although we did have a subject called moral science, but you all know in moral science period, maths or science teacher used to come and take up that period, saying that, oh, our course is lagging behind, we have to take this class, right? We hardly had any moral science period. And even when you had this period, all that you did was reading. The teacher used to call one of the students, oh, now you read. So you just read and not discuss anything. That is not how ethics or value education has to be conducted. Have more investment in the public education system, more investment in infrastructure in the schools, colleges, make it better for the people. This is a practice question that you can expect from this part of chapter, that is reforms in the education system. This brings us to the end of today's session. I know you have a webinar as well today. It's Thursday, so 8:30 that starts. So we are finished 5 minutes earlier. If you want, you can leave. Go ahead, refresh yourself, come back in 5 minutes for your webinar. If you have some questions, I'll be here for a couple of more minutes. You can ask those. If you don't have any questions, leave, take a break for your webinar, and then come back. Bye, guys. Vivek is saying mental health is also treated as a taboo in Indian society. Yes, Vivek, we discussed that. Mental health is considered more of a laughing stock, more of something that can be treated just by having a good day. Bye, guys. Bye, 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 bye. Rashida, I am that teacher. I am that teacher you're talking about. Good night. Vikram is saying, how can we say that this model will work? Any global examples? Not exact global example, but yes, we have what we have done is we have taken a lot of things from different countries. We have taken a lot of things from Norway and Iceland's system. Government has done a lot of research there. Singapore system also something that we have implemented, not copy pasted it, but for example, vocational training part, leaving the books aside, that is something that Nordic countries have done, and we have taken it from them. So Lakshana is saying, should I attend the webinar? These topics will be discussed in magazine. It's a monthly magazine. Should I do preparation for prelims? So Lakshana, if it is your 2024 is your attempt and you think the next 2 hours you can utilize better by doing something else, then you can leave it. If you think that these 2 hours will be best spent in the webinar, then attend. Again, depends entirely upon you. You decide how you can use these 2 hours in the best possible manner. If you think it's better used somewhere else, then you can do that. Okay, one last question. Arnab is saying, can Parliament change appointment committee and appointment process of CBI made through Supreme Court by passing a law? Yes, Arnab, they can. By passing a law over it, they can do that. Rashida, no, no, no. The webinar is not mine. The webinar I'm not taking. The webinar I'm not taking. Someone else is taking. You have to go and see which teacher. I've forgotten which teacher is it. Vaishnav is saying, should we look at brain drain from two perspectives? On one hand, it leads to loss of talented human resource. Other hand, it leads to more diaspora, cultural ambassadors, soft power. There are two, yes, there are two ways to look at it. But if the same people would have been in India, they would have built something much better, much bigger. So yes, there are two ways to look at it. I get your point as well. One of the reasons why India is respected around the world is because of the talent that we outsource, and we are very proud of the talent that we outsource. But yes, it's just good to imagine what would have been the case if they would have all stayed in India. Anyway, you can go ahead with your webinar thing. Do join in for the webinar at 8:30. I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you so much for watching. Bye bye. Good night. Jai Hind.